Chapter 121. Midnight. The forecastle bulwarks. Stubb and Flask mounted on them, and passing additional lashing over the anchors there hanging. No, Stubb, you may pound that knot there as much as you please, but you will never pound into me what you were just now saying. And how long ago is it since you said the very contrary? Didn't you once say that whatever ship Ahab sails in, that ship should pay something extra on its insurance policy, just as though it were loaded with powder barrels aft and boxes of lucifers forward? Stop. Now, didn't you say so? Well, suppose I did. What then? I part-changed my flesh since that time. Why not my mind? Besides, supposing we are loaded with powder barrels aft and lucifers forward, how the devil could the lucifers get afire in this drenching spray here? Why, my little man, you have pretty red hair, but you couldn't get a fire now? Shake yourself. Your Aquarius, or the water bearer, Flask, might fill pitchers at your coat collar. Don't you see then that for these extra risks, the marine insurance companies have extra guarantees? Here are hydrants, Flask. But hark again, and I'll answer you the other thing. First, take your leg off from the crown of the anchor here, though, so I can pass the rope. Now listen, what's the mighty difference between holding a mast lightning rod in a storm and standing close by a mast that hasn't got any lightning rod at all in a storm? Don't you see, you timberhead, that no harm can come to the holder of the rod unless the mast is first struck? What are you talking about, then? Not one ship in 100 carries rods, and Ahab, I, man, and all of us were in no more danger then, in my poor opinion, than all the crews in 10,000 ships now sailing the seas. Why, you king post, I suppose you would have every man in the world go about with a small lightning rod running up the corner of his hat, like a militia officer's skewered feather, and trailing behind like his sash. Why don't yen be sensible, Flask? It's easy to be sensible. Why don't ya, then? Any man with half an eye can be sensible. I don't know that, Stubb. You sometimes find it rather hard. Yes, when a fellow's, it's hard to be. That's a fact. And I am about drenched with this spray. Never mind. Catch the turn there and pass it. Seems to me we are lashing down these anchors now as if they were never going to be used again. Tying these two anchors here, Flask, seems like tying a man's hands behind him. And what big generous hands, to be sure. These are your iron fists. Hey? You don't radical by what a hold they have too. I wonder, Flask, whether the world is anchored. If she is, she swings with an uncommon long cable, though. There, hammer that knot down, and we've done. So, next, to touching land, lighting on deck is the most satisfactory. I say, just wring out my jacket, skirts, will ye? Think you, they laugh at long togs, so Flask. But seems to me, a long-tailed coat ought always to be worn, in all storms afloat. Perhaps the tails tapering down that way serve to carry off the water, you see. Same with cocked hats. The cocks form gable-end troughs, Flask. No more monkey jackets and tarpaulins for me. I must mount a swallowtail, draw down a beaver. So, hello. Whew! There goes my tarpaulin overboard. Lord, Lord, that the winds that come from heaven should be so unmanageable. This is a nasty night, lad. Chapter 122. Midnight aloft. Thunder and lightning. The main topsail yard, Tashtego, passing new rations around it. Stopped up thunder. Funny. Too much thunder up here. What's the use of thunder? We don't want thunder. We want rum. Give us a glass of rum. 123. Musket. During the most violent shocks of the typhoon, the man at the Pequod's jawbone tilt had several times been hurled to the deck by its spasmodic rope, even though preventer tackles had been attached to it. For they were slack, because some play to the tiller, was indispensable. In a severe gale like this, while the ship is but a tossed shuttlecock to the blast, it is by no means uncommon to see the needle compass that inch go round. It was thus with the Pequods. At almost every shot, the helmsman had not failed to notice the whirling velocity with which they revolved upon the cars. Oh, it is a sight that hardly anyone can behold without some sort of... Some hours after midnight, the typhoon abated so much that through the strenuous exertions of Starbuck and Stubb, one engaged forward and the other aft, the shivered remnants of the jib and fore and main topsails were cut adrift from the spars, and went eddying away to leeward like the feathers of an albatross, which sometimes are casted between that storm-tossed bird as on. The 3 corresponding new sails were now bent and reefed, and a storm trysail was set further aft, so that the ship soon went through the water with some precision, and the course, for the present, east-southeast, which to steer, practicable, was once more given to the helm. For during the violence of the gale, he had only steered according to its vicissitudes, but as he was now bringing the ship as near her course as possible, watching the compass beam, a good sign. The wind seemed coming round astern. Fine. The foul breeze became fair. Instantly, the yards were squared to the lively song on ho. The fair wind. Oh, yee-ho! Cheery men. The crew singing for joy that so promising an event should so soon have falsified the evil portents preceding. In compliance with the standing order of his commander to report immediately and at any one of the 24 hours any decided change in the affairs of the deck, Starbuck had no sooner turned the yards to the breeze. However, reluctantly and gloomily, and he mechanically went below to apprise Captain Ahab of the circumstance. Eric knocking at his stateroom, he involuntarily paused before it a moment. The cabin lamp, taking long swings this way and that, was burning fitfully, and casting fitful shadows upon the old man's bolted door, a thin one, with fixed blinds inserted in place of upper panel. The isolated subterraneousness of the cabin made a certain humming silence to reign there, though it was hooped round by all the roar of the element. The loaded muskets in the rack were shiningly revealed as they stood upright against the forward bulkhead. Starbuck was an honest, upright man, but out of Starbuck's heart, at that instant, when he saw the muskets, there strangely evolved an evil thought, but so blent with its neutral or good accompaniments that for the instinct he hardly knew it for itself. He would have shot me once. He murmured, "Yes, there's the very musket that he pointed at me, that one with the studded stock. Touch it, lift it, strain, that I who have handled so many deadly lances, strained, that I should shake so now, loaded, I must see, aye, so, and powder in the pan, that's not good, best spill it? Wait, I'll cure myself of this, I'll hold the musket boldly while I think. I come to report a fair wind to him, but how fair? Fair for death and doom? That's fair for Moby Dick. It's a fair wind that's only fair for that accursed fish. The very tube he pointed at me, the very one. This one, he would have killed me with the very thing I handle now. I and he would fain kill all his crew. Does he not say he will not strike his spars to any gale? Has he not dashed his heavenly quadrant? And in these same perilous seas, gropes he not his way by mere dead reckoning of the error abounding wrong? And in this very typhoon, did he not swear that he would have no lightning rods? But shall this crazed old man be tamely suffered to drive a whole ship's company down to doom with? Yes, it would make him the willful murderer of 30 men if this ship come to any deadly harm. And come to deadly harm, my soul swears this ship will, if Ahab have his way, then he were this instant put aside. That crime would not be his. Huh, is he muttering in his sleep? Yes, just there and there. He's sleeping. Aye, but still alive, and soon awake again. I can't withstand thee. Then, old man, not reason, not remonstrance, not entreaty wilt thou hearken to. All this thou scornest, flat obedience to thy own flat commands. This is all thou breathest. Aye, and say, thus the men have vowed by vow. Say'st all of us are Ahab's. Great God, forbid, but is there no other way, no lawful way? Make him a prisoner to be taken home. What? Hope to wrest this old man's living power from us. Only a fool would try it, say he were Peniandi. Not at all over with ropes and hawsers, chained down to ring bolts on this cabin floor. He would be more hideous than a caged tiger then. I could not endure the sight, could not possibly fly his howlings. All comfort, sleep itself, inestimable easy, would leave me on the long intolerable voyage. What then remained? The land is hundreds of leagues away, and locked Japan the nearest. I stand alone here upon an open sea, with two oceans and the whole continent between me and law. I stand, aye, 'tis so. Is heaven a murderer when its lightning strikes a would-be murderer in his bed? Tindering sheets and skin together, and would I be a murderer then, if, and slowly, stealthily, and half sideways, he placed the loaded musket's end against the door. On this level, Ahab's hammock swings within, his head this way. A touch, and Starbuck may survive to hug his wife and child again. Oh, Mary, boy, but if I wake thee not to death, old man can tell to what unsounded Starbuck's body this day week may sink, was all the great God. Where art thou? Shall I? The wind has gone down and shifted, sir. The fore and main topsails are reefed and set. She heads her course. Stern all. Oh, Moby Dick, I clutched thy heart at last. Such were the sounds that now came hurtling from out the old man's tormented sleep, as if Starbuck's voice had caused the long dumb dream to speak. The yet leveled musket shook like a drunkard's arm against the panel. Starbuck seemed wrestling with an angel, but turning from the door, he placed the desk tube in its rack and left the place. He's too sound asleep, Mr. Stubb. Go thou down and wake him and tell him. I must see to the deck here. Thou knowest what to say. Chapter 124. The Needle. Next morning, the not yet subsided sea rolled in long, slow billows of mighty bulk, and striding in the Pequod's gurgling track, pushed her on like giants' palms outspread. The strong, unstaggering breeze abounded, so that sky and air seemed vast, outbellying. The whole world boomed before the wind, muffled, full morning light. The invisible sun was only known by the spread intensity of his place, where his bayonet rays moved on in stacks, emblazonings, as of crowned Babylonian kings and queens, reigned over everything. The sea was as a crucible of molten gold that bubblingly leaps with light, and long maintaining an enchanted silence, Ahab stood apart, and every time the tettering ship loweringly pitched down her bowsprit, he turned to eye the bright sun's rays produced, and when she profoundly settled by the stern, he turned behind and saw the sun's rearward place, and how the same yellow rays were blending with his undeviating wing. My ship, thou mightest well be taken now for the sea chariot of the sun. Aho! All ye nations before my prow, I bring the send, they'll come on the further billows. Hello, a tandem, I drive the sea, that suddenly reined back by some counter thought. He hurried towards the helm, huskily demanding how the ship was heading. East, suit east, sir, said the frightened steers. Well, thou liest. Smiting him with his clenched fist, heading east at this hour in the morning, and the sun astern. Upon this, every soul was confounded, for the phenomenon just then observed by Ahab had unaccountably escaped everyone else. but its very blinding palpableness must have been the cause. Thrusting his head halfway into the binnacle, Ahab caught one glimpse of the compasses. His uplifted arms slowly fell. For a moment, he almost seemed to stagger. Standing behind him, Starbuck looked low. The two compasses pointed east, and the Pequod was as infallibly going west. But ere the first wild alarm could get out abroad among the crew, the old man with a rigid laugh exclaimed, "I have it. It has happened before. Mr. Starbuck, last night's thunder turned our compasses? So, thou hast before now heard of such a thing. Aye, but never before has it happened to me." "Sir," said the pale mate gloomily, "here it must need be said that accidents like this have in more than one case occurred to ships in violent storms. The magnetic energy, as developed in the mariner's needle, is, as all know, essentially one with the electricity beheld in heaven. Hence, it is not to be much marveled at that such things should be. Instances where the lightning has actually struck the vessel, so as to smite down some of the spars and rigging. The effect upon the needle has at times been still more fatal, all its lodestone virtue being annihilated, so that the before magnetic steel was of no more use than an old wife's knitting. But in either case, the needle never again, of itself, recovers the original virtue thus marred or lost. And if the binnacle compasses be affected, the same fate reaches all the others that may be, even were the lowermost one inserted into the Helsing, deliberately standing before the binnacle and eyeing the transient compasses. It needed to make it worse, and indomesticably worse. In the history, the yards were hard up, and once more the Pequod thrust her undaunted bows into the opposing wind. For the supposed fair one had only been juggling her. Meanwhile, whatever were his own secret thoughts, Starbuck said nothing, but quietly he issued all requisite orders, while Stubb and Flask, who in some small degree seemed then to be sharing his feelings, likewise unmurmured acting. As for the men, though some of them lowly rumbled, their fear of Ahab was greater than their fear of fate. But as ever before, the pagan harpooner remained almost wholly unimpressed, or, if impressed, it was only with a certain magnetism shot into their hearts from inflexible Ahab's. For a space, the old man walked the deck in rolling reveries, but chancing to slip with his ivory heel, he saw the crushed copper sight tubes of the quadrant he had the day before dashed to the deck. "Thou poor, proud heaven-gazer and sun's pilot, yesterday I wrecked thee, and today the compasses would fain have wrecked me. So, but Ahab lord over the level lodestone, Mr. Starbuck, a lance without a pole, a topmaul, and the smallest of the sailmakers, quick, accessory perhaps to the impulse dictating the thing he was now about to do, were certain prudential motives, whose object might have been to revive the spirits of his crew by a stroke of his subtile skill, in a matter so wondrous as that of the inverted compasses. Besides, the old man well knew that to steer by transport, though clumsily practicable, was not a thing to be passed over by superstitious sailors, without some shudderings. "Men," said he, steadily turning upon the crew, as the maid handed him the things he had demanded, "my men, the thunder turned old Ahab's needles, but out of this bit of steel. Ahab can make one of his own that will point as true as any." Abashed glances of servile wonder were exchanged by the sailors as this was said, and with fascinated eyes we awaited whatever magic might follow. But Starbuck looked away. With a blow from the topmaul, Ahab knocked off the steel head of the lance, and then handing to the mate the long iron rod remaining, bade him hold it upright without its touching the deck. Then, with the maul, after repeatedly smiting the upper end of this iron rod, he placed the blunted needle endwise on the top of it, and less strongly hammered that, several times, the mate still holding the rod as before. then going through some small strange motions with it, whether indispensable to the magnetizing of the steel or merely intended to augment the awe of the crew, is uncertain. He called for linen thread, and moving to the binnacle, slipped out the two reversed knees there, and horizontally suspended the sail needle by its middle over one of the compass compass. At first the steel went round and round, quivering and vibrating at either end, but at last it settled to its place, when Ahab, who had been intently watching for this result, stepped frankly back from the binnacle and, pointing his stretched arm towards it, exclaimed, "The sun is east, and that compass swears it." One after another they peered in, for nothing but their own eyes could persuade such ignorance as theirs, and one after another they slunk away, in his fiery eyes of scorn and triumph. You then saw Ahab in all his fatal pride. Chapter 125. The Log. While now the fated Pequod had been so long afloat, the log and line, but very seldom used, owing to a confident reliance upon other means of determining the vessel's place. Some merchantmen, many whalemen, especially when cruising, wholly neglect the log, though at the same time it performed sacred, regularly putting down upon the customary slate the course steered by the ship, as well as the presumed average ration every hour. It had been thus with the Pequod, the wooden reel and angular log attached hung, long untouched, just beneath the railing of the after bulwark. Rains and spray had damped it, sun and wind had warped it. All the elements had combined to rot the thing that hung so idly. But heedless of all this, his mood seized Ahab as he happened to glance upon the reel, not many hours after the magnet scene, and he remembered how his quadrant was no more, and recalled his frantic oath about the level log and line. The ship was sailing plungingly. Astern the billows rolled in riots. Forward, heave the log. Two seamen came, the golden-hued Tahitian and the grizzly Manxman. Take the reel, one of, now heave. They went towards the extreme stern, on the ship's lee side, where the deck, with the oblique energy, was now almost dipping in the side-lashing sea. The Manxman took the reel, and holding it high up by the projecting handles of the spindle, round which the spool of lining so stood with the angular hook hanging downward till Ahab advanced to it. Ahab stood before him, and was lightly unwinding some 30 or 40 turns to form a preliminary hand coil to toss overboard, when the old Manxman, who was intently eyeing both him and the line, made bold to speak. "Sir, I mistrusted. This line looks far gone. Long heat and wet have spoiled it. 'Twill hold, old gentleman." "Long heat and wet have they spoiled thee?" "That seems to hold, or truer perhaps, life holds deep." "Not thou it. I hold thee, sir. But just as my captain says, with these grey hairs of mine 'tis not worth while to speak, especially with a superior who will never confess." "What's that?" "There now is a patched professor in Queen Nature's granite-founded college, but methinks he's too subservient. Where wert thou born?" "Little rocky Isle of Man, sir." "Excellent. Know'st the world by that." "I know not, sir, but I was born there, in the Isle of Man." "Hey, well, the other way. It's good. Here's a man from Man, a man born in once independent Man, and now a man of man, which is sucked in by what? Up with the reel. The dead, blind wall butts all inquiring heads at last. Up with it. So, the log was heaved, loose coils rapidly straightened out in the long, dragging line astern, and then, instantly, the reel began to work. In turn, jerkingly raised and lowered by the rolling billows, the towing resistance of the log caused the old reelman to stagger, hold hard, snap. The overstrained line sagged down in one long festoon. The tugging wall was gone. I crush the quadrant. The thunder turns the needles. And now the mad sea parts the long line. But Ahab can mend all. Haul in here, Tahitian. Reel up, Manxman. And look ye, let the carpenter make another log, and mend out the line. See to it. There he goes now. To him, nothing's happened. But to me, the skewer seems loosening out of the middle of the world. Holland? Daisha. These lines run whole and whirling out, coming broken and dragging slow. Ha! Pip, come to help. Hey! Pip? Pip. Who call ye Pip? Pip jumped from the whaleboat. Pip's missing. Let's see now if ye haven't fished him up here, fisherman. It drags hard. Guess he's holding on. Jerkin. Tahiti. Jerk him off. We haul in no cowards here. Oh, there's his arm just breaking water. A hatchet. Cut it off. We haul in no cowards here. Captain Ahab. Sir. Here's Pip, trying to get on shoulderboard again. Peace, thou crazy loon, cried the manxman, seizing him by the arm. Away from the quarterdeck. The greater idiot ever scolds the lesser, muttered Ahab. Hands off from that holiness. Where sayest thou Pip was? Boy? Astern there, sir. Astern. Whoa. And who art thou, boy? I see not my reflection in the vacant pupils of thy eyes. Oh, God. But man should be a thing for immortal souls to sieve through. Who art thou, boy? Bellboy, sir. Ships? Crier. Ding. Dong, ding, Pip. 100 pounds of clay for Pip. 5 feet high, barks cowardly, quickest known by that. Ding dong ding. Who's seen Pip, the coward? There can be no hearts above the snow line. Oh, ye frozen heavens, look down here. Ye did beget this luckless child, and have abandoned ye creative liberty. Here, boy, Ahab's cabin shall be Pip's home, henceforth while Ahab lives. Thou touchest my inmost center, boy. Thou art tied to me by cords of my heartstring. Come, let's down. What's this? Here's velvet shark skin, intensely gazing at Ahab's hand and feeling it. Ah, now had poor Pip but felt so kind a thing as this, perhaps he had ne'er been lost. This seems to me, sir, as a manlet, something that weak souls may hold by. Oh, sir, let old Perth now come and rivet these two hands together, the black one with the white, for I will not let this go. Oh boy, nor will I be, unless I should thereby drag. Come then to my cabin. Lo, ye believers in God's all goodness, and in man all ill, lo, see the omniscient gods oblivious of suffering men, though idiotic and knowing not what he does, yet full of the sweetness of love and gratitude. Come, I feel prouder leading thee by thy black hand than though I grasped an emperor's. There go 2 daft ones now, muttered the old Manxman. One daft with strength, the other daft with mucus. But here's the end of the rotten line, all dripping too. This? No good, eh? I think we have best have a new line altogether. I'll see Mr. Stubb about it. Chapter 126. The Life Boy. Steering now southeastward by Ahab's leveled steel, and her progress solely determined by Ahab's level log. The Pequod held on her path towards the equator, making so long a passage through such unfrequented waters, descrying no ships, and ere long, sideways impelled by unbearable monotonous line. All these seemed to the strange calm things, leaving some riotous and disparate scene. At last, when the ship drew near to the outskirts, as it were, of the equatorial fishing ground, in the deep darkness that goes before the dawn, was sailing by a cluster of rocky islets. The watch, then headed by Flask, was startled by a cry so plainly wild and like half-articulate the ghosts of all here that one and all they started furious, and for the space of some moments stood, or sat, or leaned, all transfixedly listening, like the carved Roman slave, while that wild cry, the Christian, or civilized part of the crew, said it was Burmese and shouldn't. But the pagan harpooneers remained unappalled. Yet the great Manxman, the oldest mariner of all, declared that the wild thrilling sounds that were heard were the voices of newly drowned men in the sea. Below in his hammock, Ahab did not hear of this till grey dawn, when he came to the village. It was then recounted to him by Flask, not unaccompanied with hinted dark meanings. He hollowly laughed, and thus explained the wonder. Those rocky islands the ship had passed were the resort of great numbers of seals, and some young seals that had lost their dams, or some dams that had lost their cubs, must have risen nigh the ship and tapped company with her, crying and sobbing with their human sort of way. But this is only the more affected some of them, because most mariners cherish a very superstitious feeling about seals, arising not only from their peculiar tones when in distress, but also from the human look of their round heads and semi-intelligent faces, seen peeringly uprising from the water alongside it. In the sea, under certain circumstances, seals have more than once been mistaken for men, but the bodies of the crew were destined to receive a most plausible confirmation in the fate of one of their number that morning. At sunrise, this man went from his hammock to his masthead at the fore, and whether it was that he was not yet half waked from his sleep, for sailors sometimes go aloft in a trance state, whether it was thus with him, there is now no telling. But be that as it may, he had not been long at his perch, when a cry was heard, a cry and a rushing. Looking up, they saw a falling phantom in the air, and looking down, a little tossed heap of white bubbles of the sea. The life buoy, a long slender cask, was dropped from the stern, where it always hung obedient to a cunning spring, but no hand rose to seize it, and the sun having long beat upon this cask, it had shrunken, so that it slowly filled, and that parched wood also filled at its every pore. And the studded iron-bound cask followed the sailor to the bottom, as if to yield him his pillow, though in sooth but a hard one. And thus the first man of the Pequod that mounted the mast to look out for the white whale on the white whale's peculiar ground. That man was swallowed up in the deep, but few perhaps thought of that at the time. Indeed, in some sort they were not grieved at this event, at least as a quartet, for they regarded it not as a foreshadowing of evil in the future, but as the fulfillment of an evil already presaged. They declared that now they knew the reason of those wild shrieks they had heard the night before. But again, the old Manxman said nay, the lost life buoy was now to be replaced. Starbuck was directed to see to it, but as no cask of sufficient lightness could be found, and as in the feverish eagerness of what seemed the approaching crisis of the voyage, all hands were impatient in toil, but what was directly connected with its final end, whatever that might be. Therefore, they were going to leave the ship's stern unprovided with a buoy, when by certain strange signs and innuendos, Queequeg hinted a hint concerning his coffin. A life buoy of a coffin, cried Starbuck, starting. Rather queer, that, I should say, said Stubb. It will make a good enough one, said Flask. The carpenter here can arrange it easily. Bring it up. There's nothing else for it, said Starbuck, after a melancholy pause. Rig it, carpenter. Rig it, carpenter. Do not look at me so. The coffin, I mean. Dost thou hear me? Rig it. And shall I nail down the lid, sir? Moving his hand, as with a hammer. Aye. And shall I caulk the seams, sir? See it. Moving his hand, as with a caulking iron. Aye. And shall I then pay over the same with pitch, sir? Moving his hand, as with a pitch pot. Away. What possesses to this? Make a life buoy of the coffin. Mr. Stubb, Mr. Flask, come forward with me. He goes off in a huff. The whole he can endure. At the parts he balks. Now I don't like this. I make a leg for Captain Ahab, and he wears it like a gentleman. But I make a bandbox for Queequeg, and he won't put his head into it. All my pains to go for nothing with that coffin, and now I'm ordered to make a life buoy. It's like turning an old coat, going to bring the flesh on the other side. I don't like this cobbling sort of business. I don't like it at all. It's undignified. It's not my place. Let tinker's brats do tinkerings. We are their betters. I like to take in hand none, but clean, virgin, fair, and square mathematical jobs. Something that regularly begins at the beginning, and is at the middle when midway, and comes to an end, not a cobbler's job that's at an end in the middle, and at the beginning at the end. It's the old woman's tricks to be giving cobbling jobs. Lord, what an affection all old women have for tinker. I know an old woman of 65 who ran away with a bald-headed young tinker once. And that's the reason I never would work for lonely widow old women ashore when I kept my job shop in the vineyard. They might have taken it into their lonely old heads to run off with me. But hi-ho! There are no caps at sea, but snow caps. Lend me a sea, nail down the lid, caulk the seams. Pay over the same with batten them down tight, and hang it with the snap spring ship's stern. Wherever such things done before, with a coffin, some superstitious old carpenters now would be tied up in the rig. Here they would do the job. But I'm made of knotty, a rustic hemlock. I don't budge, covered with a coffin, sailing about with a graveyard dray. But never mind. We workers in woods make bridal bedsteads and card tables, as well as coffins and hearses. We work by the month, or by the job, or by the profit. Not for us to ask the why or wherefore of our work, unless it be too confounded cobbling in the mustachioed hen. I'll do the job now, tenderly. I'll have me, let's see, how many in the ship's company, all told, but I've forgotten. Anyway, I'll have me 30 separate Turks-headed lifelines, each 3 feet long, hanging all round to the coffin. Then, if the whole go down, there'll be 30 lively fellows all fighting for one coffin, a sight not seen very often beneath the sun. Come hammer, caulking iron, pitch pot, and marling spike. Let's to it. Chapter 127. The deck. The coffin laid upon 2 wine tubs between the vice bench and the open hatchway. The carpenter caulking its seams. The string of twisted oakum slowly unwinding from a large roll of it, placed in the bosom of his frock. Ahab comes slowly from the cabin gangway, and here's Pip following him. Back, Rad. I will be with ye again, presently. He goes. Not this ham complies with my humor more genially than that boy. Middle aisle of the church. What's here? Life buoy, sir? Mr. Starbuck's orders. Oh, look, sir. Beware the hatchway. Thank ye, man. Thy coffin lies handy to the vault. Sir, the hatchway. Oh, so it does, sir. So it does. Art not thou the layman? Look, did not this stump from thy shop? I believe it did, sir. Does the ferrule stand, sir? Well enough, but art thou not also the undertaker? Aye, sir. I patched up this thing here as a coffin for Quick, but they've set me now to turning it into something else. And tell me, art thou not an errant, all grasping, intermeddling, monopolizing, heathenish old scamp to be one day making, and the next day coffins to clap them in, life buoys out of those same? Thou art as unprincipled as the gods, and as much of a jack of all trades. But I do not mean anything. I do as I do. The gods again. Hark ye. Dost thou not ever sing working about a coffin? The Titans, they say, hum the snatches when chipping out the craters for volcanoes, and the grave digger in the play sings spade in hand. Dost thou never? Sing, sir? Do I sing? Oh, I'm indifferent enough, sir, for that. But the reason why the grave digger made music must have been because there was none in his spade, sir. But the caulking mallet is full of it. Hark to it. And aye, and that's because the lid there's a sounding board, and what in all things makes the sounding board is this. There's naught beneath. And yet, a coffin with a body in it rings pretty much the same. Carpenter. Hast thou ever helped carry a bier and heard the coffin knock against the church? Faith, sir. Faith. What's that? Why, faith, sir. It's only a sort of exclamation like, that's all, sir. Go on. I was about to say, sir, that art thou a silkworm? Dost thou spin thy own shroud out of thyself? Look at thy bosom. Despatch, and get these traps out of sight. He goes aft. And that was sudden, now. But squalls come sudden in hot latitude. I've heard that the Isle of Albemarle, one of the Galapagos, is cut by the equator, right in, seems to me, some sort of equator cuts. Jan Olin, too. Right in his middle. He's always under the line, fiery, hot. Tell ya, he's looking this way. Come, Oakham. He's looking this way. Come, Oakham. Quick, here we go again. This wooden mallet is the cork, and I'm the professor. Musical glasses. Tap, tap. Ahab to himself. There's a sight. There's a sound. The gray-headed woodpecker tapping the hollow tree. Blind and dumb might well be out. See, that thing rests on 2 line tubs, full of tow lines. A most malicious wag, that fellow. Rat, tat, so man seconds tick. Oh, how immaterial are all materials. What things real are they? But imponderable thoughts. Here now's the very dreaded symbol of grim death by a mere hap, made the expressive sign of the help and hope of most endangered life. A life buoy of a coffin. Does it go further? Can it be that, in some spiritual sense, the coffin is, after all, but an immortality preserved?
We'll think of that.
But no. So far, gone am I in the dark side of earth, but its other side, the theoretic bright one, seems but uncertain. Twilight. Will ye never have done, Carpenter, with that accursed sound? I go below? Let me not see that thing here when I return again. Now, then, Pip will talk this over. I do suck most wondrous philosophy from thee. Some unknown conduits from the unknown worlds must empty into thee. Chapter 128. The Pequod meets the Rachel. Next day, a large ship, the Rachel, was descried bearing directly down upon the Pequod, all her spars thickly clustering. At the time, the Pequod was making good speed through the water. But as the broad-winged stranger shot nigh to her, the boastful sails all fell together as thick ladders that are burst, and all life fled from bad news. She brings bad news, Mother the Old Mason. But ere her commander, who with trumpet to mouth stood up in his boat, ere he could hopefully hail, Ahab's voice was heard. Hast seen the white whale? Aye, yesterday. Have ye seen a whaleboat adrift, following his journey? Ahab negatively, and would then have fain boarded the stranger, when the stranger captain himself, having stopped his vessel's way, was seen descending her side. A few keen pulls, and his boat hook soon clinched the Pequod's main chains, and he sprang to the deck. Immediately he was recognized by Ahab for a Nantucketer he knew, but no formal salutation was exchanged. Where was he? Not killed. Not killed, cried Ahab, closely advancing. How was it? It seemed that somewhat late on the afternoon of the day previous, while 3 of the stranger's boats were engaged with the shoal gales, which had led them some 4 or 5 miles from the ship, and while they were yet in swift chase to windward, the white hump and head of Moby Dick had suddenly loomed up out of the water, not very far to leeward, whereupon the 4th rigged boat, a reserved one, had been instantly lowered in. After a keen sail before the wind, this 4th boat, the swiftest keeled of all, seemed to have succeeded in fastening, at least as well as the man at the masthead could tell anything. In the distance, he saw the diminished, dotted boat, and then a swift gleam of bubbling white water, and after that, Nothing more, whence it was concluded that the stricken whale must have indefinitely run away with his pursuers, as often happens. There was some apprehension, but no positive alarm as yet. The recall signals were placed in the rigging. Darkness came on, and forced to pick up her 3 far to windward boats, going in quest of the 4th one in precisely opposite direction. The ship had not only been necessitated to leave that boat to its fate till near midnight, but for the time to increase her distance from it. But the rest of her crew being at last safe aboard, she crowded all sail, stun sail on stun sail, after the missing boat, kindling a fire in her tripods for a weekend, and every other man aloft on the lookout. For though when she had thus sailed a sufficient distance to gain the presumed place of the absent ones when last seen, though she then paused to lower her spare boats, to pull all around her, and not finding anything, had again dashed on, again paused and lowered her boats, and though she had thus continued, doing till daylight, yet not the glimpse of the missing keel had been seen. The story told, the stranger captain immediately went on to reveal his object in boarding the Pequod. He desired that ship to unite with his own in the search, by sailing over the sea, some 4 or 5 miles apart, on parallel lines, and so sweeping a double horizon, as it were. "I will wager something now," whispered Stubb to Flask, "that someone in a missing boat wore off that captain's best coat. Mayhap his watch, who's so cursed anxious to get it back. Who ever heard of 2 pious whale ships cruising after one missing whaleboat in the height of the whaling season? See, Flask, only see how pale he looks. Pale in the very buttons of his eyes. Look, it wasn't the coat. It must have been my boy, my own boy as a monk. For God's sake, I beg, a conjurer," here exclaimed the stranger captain to Ahab, who thus far had but isolated. "For 48 hours I can charter your ship. I will gladly pay and roundly pay for it. If there be no other way, for 48 that, you must, oh you must, and you shall do this thing." "His son," cried Stubb. "Oh, it's his son he's lost." "Well, I take back the coat, and watch what says Ahab. We must save that boy. He's drowned with the rest on him. Last night," said the old mate's sailor standing behind him. "I heard." All of ye heard their spirits. Now, as it shortly turned out, what made this incident of the Rachel the more melancholy was the circumstance that not only were the captain's sons on the number of the, but among the number of the other boat's crews at the same time, but on the other hand separated from the ship during the dark vicissitudes of the chase, there had been still another son, as that for a time the wretched father was plunged in the bottom of the cruelest perplexity, which was only solved for him by his chief mates instinctively adopting the ordinary procedure of a whale ship in such emergencies, that is, when placed between jeopardized but divided boats, always to pick up the majority first. But the captain, for some unknown constitution, had refrained from mentioning all this, and not till forced to it by Ahab's iciness did he allude to his one yet missing boy, a little lad, but 12 years old, whose father, with the earnest but unmisgiving hardihood Nantucketers' own love, had thus early sought to initiate a vocation almost imminently the destiny of race. Nor does it unfrequently occur that Nantucket captains will send a son of such tender age away from them for a protracted 3 or 4 years' voyage in some other ship than their own, so that their first knowledge of a whaleman's career shall be uninnervated by any chance display of a father's natural but untimely partiality, or undue apprehensiveness and concern. Meantime, now the stranger was still beseeching his poor boon of Ahab, and Ahab still stood like an angel, receiving every shock, but without the least quivering. "I will not go," said the stranger, "till you say aye to do to me as you would have me do to you in the like case. For you too have a boy, Captain Ahab, though but a child and nestling safely at home. Now, the child of your old age too. Yes, Yes, you relent. I see it. Run, run, men, now, and stand by to square in the yards. Avast, cried Ahab, touch not a rope yard. Then, in a voice that prolongingly molded every word, Captain Gardiner, I will not do it. Even now, I lose time. Goodbye, goodbye. God bless you, and may I forgive myself, but I must go. Mr. Starbuck, look at the binnacle watch, and in 3 minutes from this present instant warn off all strangers. Then brace forward again, and let the ship sail as before. Hurriedly turning, with averted face, he descended into his cabin, leaving the strange captain transfixed at this unconditional and utter rejection of his so earnest suit. But starting from Gardiner silently hurried to the side. More fell, then stepped through his boat, and returned to his ship. Soon, the two ships diverged their ways, and long as the strange vessel, she was seen to yaw hither and thither every dark spot, however small, on the sea, this way, and that her yards were swarm wrapped, starboard and larboard. She continued to tack. Now she beat against a head sea, and again it pushed her before, while all the while her mast and yards were thickly clustered with men, as 3 tall cherry trees, when the boys are cherrying among the boughs, but by her still halting course and winding, woeful way. You plainly saw that this ship that so wept with spray still remained without comfort. She was Rachel, weeping for her children, because they were not. Chapter 129. The cabin. Ahab, moving to go on deck. Pip catches him by the hand to follow. Lad, lad, I tell thee thou must not follow Ahab now. The hour is coming. Ahab would not scare thee from him, yet would not have thee by him. There is that in thee, poor lad, which I feel too curing to my malady. Like cures like, and for this hunt, my malady becomes my most desired health. Do thou abide below here, where they shall serve thee, as if thou wert the captain. Ay, lad, thou shalt sit here, own screwed chair. Another screw to it, thou must be. No, no, no. You haven't had a whole body, sir. Do ye, but use poor me for your one lost leg? Only tread upon me, sir. I ask no more, so I remain a part of, spite of million villains. This makes me a bigot and the fidelicest fidelity in the black, and crazy, but methinks like, cures like, applies to him too. He grows so seen again. They tell me, sir, that Stubb did once desert poor little Pip, whose drowned bones now show white for all the blackness of Livingston. But I will never desert thee, sir, as Stubb did. Sir, I must go with ye. If thou speakest thus to me much more, Ahab's purpose keels up in me. I tell thee no. It cannot be. Oh, good master, 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 master. Weep so, and I will murder thee. Have a care, for Ahab too is mad. Listen, and thou wilt often hear my ivory foot upon the deck, and still know that I am there. And now I quit thee, by hand, Max. True art thou, lad, as the circumference to its center. So God forever bless thee, and if it come to that, God forever save thee. Let what will befall, Ahab go. Pip steps one step forward. Here he this instant stood, a stand in his air, but I'm alone. Now were even poor Pip here, I could endure it, but he's missing. He must be up here. Let's try the door. What? Neither lock, nor bolt, nor bar. And yet there's no opening. It must be the spell. He told me to stay here. Aye, and told me this screwed chair was mine. Here then, I'll seat me against the transom in the ship's full minnow, all her keel and her 3 masts before me. Here, our old sailors say, in their black 74s, great admirals sometimes sit at the table and lord it over rows of captains and lieutenants. What's this? Epaulets! Epaulets! The epaulets! All come crowding. Pass round the decanters. Glad to see Ye, fill up, monsieur. What an odd feeling now, when a black boy's host, a white man with gold lace upon their coat. Messieurs, had ye seen one pet, a little Negro lad, 5 feet high, hangdog look, and cowardly, jumped from a whaleboat once? Seen it? No. Well then, fill up again, captains, and let's drink shame upon all cowards. I name no names. Shame upon them. Put 1 foot upon the table. Shame upon all cowards. Hist. Above there, I hear ivory. Oh, master. Master, I am indeed downhearted when you walk over me, but here I'll stay, though the stern strikes rocks. And they bulge through, and oysters come to join me. Chapter 130, The Hat. And now that at the proper time and place, after so long and wide a preliminary, Ahab, all other wailing water swept, seemed to have chased his foe into it, to slay him more secure, now that he found himself hard by the very latitude and longitude where his tormenting wound had been inflicted. Now that a vessel had been spoken, which on the very day preceding had actually encountered Moby Dick, and now that all his successive meetings with his ships contrastingly incurred to show the demoniac endurance with which the white whale is hunted, whether sinning or sinned against. Now it was that there lurked a something in the old man's eyes which it was hardly sufferable for feeble souls to see. As the unsetting polar star which through the livelong Arctic 6 months' night sustains its piercing, steady, central gaze, so Ahab's purpose now fixedly gleamed down upon the constant midnight of the gloomy crew. It domineered above them so that all their bodies, doubts, misgivings, fears were fain to hide beneath their souls, and not sprout forth a single spear. In this foreshadowing interval, too, all humor, forced or natural, vanished. Stug no more strove to raise a smile. Starbuck no more strove to check one. Alike joy and sorrow, hope and fear seemed ground to finest dust and powdered for the time in the clamped mortar of Ahab's iron soul. Like machines, they dumbly moved about the deck, ever conscious that the old man despoed high. But did you deeply scan him in his more secret, confidential hours, when he brought no glance, but one was on him? Then you would have seen that even as Ahab's eyes so on the crew's, the inscrutable Parsi's glance awed his, or somehow, at least, in some wild way, at times, affected it. Such an added, gliding strangeness began to invest the thin Vidal. Such ceaseless shudderings, shaking, that the men looked dubious at him, half uncertain, as it seemed, whether indeed he were of substance, or else of a shadow cast upon him by some unseen body. And that shadow was always hovering. For not by night, even, had Fidela ever certainly been known to slumber or go below. He would stand still for hours, but never sat or his one but wondrous eyes did plainly say, "We two watchmen never rest, nor any time, by night or day, the mariners now step upon the deck, unless Ahab, either standing in his pivot hole, or exactly pacing the planks between 2 undue mainmasts and a mizen, or else they saw him standing in the cabin scuttle, his living foot advanced upon the deck, as if to step, his hat slouched heavily over his eyes, so that, however motionless he stood, however the days and nights were added on, that he had not sworn him. Yet, hidden beneath that slouching hat, they could never tell for all his eyes were, or whether he was still intent. No matter, though he stood so in the scuttle for a whole hour on the stretch, in the unheated night gathered in beads of dew upon that stone-carved cup hat. The clothes that the night had wet, the next day's sunshine dried upon him. And so, day after day, and night after night, he went no more beneath the planks, whatever he wanted from the cabin that thing he sent for. He ate in the same open air, that is, his 2 only meals, breakfast and dinner. Supper he never touched. nor reeked his beard, which darkly grew all gnarled, and unearthed roots of trees blown over, would still grow out of a naked base, either perish in the upper. But though his whole life was now become one watch on deck, and thought the Parsee's mystic watch was without intermission his own, yet these two never seemed to speak, one man to the other, unless it longed into some passing unmomentous matter necessary. Though such a potent spell seemed secretly, openly, into their awestruck crew, they seemed whole like the sunday, if by day they chanced to speak one word. By night, dumb men were both, so far as concerned the slightest verbal interchange. At times, for longest hours, without a single hail, they stood far parted in the starlight. Ahab in his scuttle, the Parsee by the mainmast, but still fixedly gazing upon each other, as if in the Parsee Ahab saw his forethrown shadow, and Ahab the Parsee his abandoned substance. And yet somehow did Ahab, in his own proper self, as daily, hourly, and every instant, commandingly revealed to his subordinate, Ahab seemed an independent lord, the Parsee but his slave. Still again both seemed yoked together, unseen tyrant driving them. The lean shade, siding, the solid rib, for be this Parsee what he may, all rib and keel was solid. At the first faintest glimmering of the dawn, his iron voice was heard from aft, manned the mastheads, and all through the day, till after sunset, and after twilight, the same voice every hour, at the striking of the helmsman's bell, was heard, sharp, sharp. But when 3-4 days had slided by, after meeting, the children seeking Rachel, and no spout had yet been seen, the monomaniac old man seemed distrustful of his crew's fidelity, at least in nearly all except the pagan harpooneers, and he seemed to doubt even whether Stubb and Flask might not willingly overlook the sight he saw. But if these suspicions were really his, he sagaciously refrained from verbally expressing them. However, his actions might seem to hint them. I will have the first sight of the whale myself, he said. Ahab must have the doubloon. And with his own hands he rigged a nest of basketed bowlines. This, and sending a hand aloft with a single sheave block to secure to the mainmast head, he received the 2 ends of the downward rope, and attaching one to his basket, prepared a pin for the other end, in order to fasten it at the rail. This done, with that end yet in his hand, and standing beside the pin, he looked round upon his crew, sleeping from one to the other, and pausing his glance long upon Gagu, Queequeg, Tashtego, and but shunning Fadala, and then, settling his firm malign eye upon the chief mate, said, Take the rope, sir, I give it into thy hands, Starbuck. Then arranging his person in the basket, he gave the word for them to hoist him to his perch, Starbuck being the one who secured the rope at last, and afterwards stood near it, and thus with one hand Ahab the sea for miles and miles. When in working with his hands at some lofty, almost isolated place in the rigging, which chances to afford no foothold, the sailor at sea is hoisted up to that spot, and sustained there by the rope. Under these circumstances, its fastened end on deck is always given in strict charge to some one man who has the special watch of it, because in such a wilderness of running rigging, whose various different relations aloft cannot always be infallibly discerned by what is seen of them at the deck, and when the deck ends of these ropes are being every few minutes cast down from the fastenings, it would be but a natural fatality, if, unprovided with a constant one, the hoisted sailor should be cast adrift and fall. So, Ahab's proceedings in this matter were not unusual. The only strange thing about them seemed to be that Starbuck, almost the one only man who had ever ventured to oppose him, with anything in the slightest degree approaching to decision, one of those two whose faithfulness on the lookout he had seemed to doubt somewhat. It was strange that this was the very man he should select for his watcher, freely giving his whole life into such an otherwise distrusted person's hand. Now, the first time, Ahab was perched aloft. Ere he had been there 10 minutes, one of those red-billed savage seahawks, which so often fly incommodiously close round the manned mastheads of whalemen in these latitudes. One of these birds came wheeling and screaming round his head in a maze of untrackably swift circlings. Then it darted 1,000 straight up, then spiralized downwards, and went eddying again round his head. But with his gaze fixed upon the dim and distant horizon, Ahab seemed not to mark this wild bird, nor indeed would anyone else have marked it much, it being no uncommon circumstance. Only now, almost the least heedful eye seemed to see some sort of cunning meaning in almost every sight. Your hat, your hat, your hat, sir, suddenly cried the Sicilian seasoned masthead directly behind Ahab, though somewhat lower than his level. But already the sable went for the old prize. The long hooked bill at his head, with a scream, the black hawk darted away with his prize. An eagle flew thrice round Tarquin's head, removing his cap to replace it, and thereupon Tanaquil, his wife, declared that Tarquin would be king of Rome, but only by the replacing of the cap was the omen accounted good. Ahab's hat was never restored. The wild hawk flew on, and on with it, far in advance of the prow, and at last disappeared. All from the point of that disappearance, a minute black spot was dimly discerned, falling from that vast height. Chapter 131. The Pequod meets the Delight. The intense Pequod sailed on. The rolling waves and days went by. The life buoy coffin still lightly swung, and another ship, most miserably misnamed the Delight, was described. As she drew nigh, all eyes were fixed upon her broad beam, called shears, which, in some whaling ships, crossed the quarter-deck at the height of 8 or 9 feet, serving to carry the spare, unrigged, or disabled boats. Upon the stranger's shears were beheld the shattered white ribs, and some few splintered planks of what had once been a whale boat, that you now saw through this wreck as plainly as you see through the peeled, half-unhinged, and bleeding skeleton of a horse. Have seen the white whale. Look, replied the hollow-cheeked captain from his taffrail, and with his trumpet he pointed to the wreck. Has killed him. The harpoon is not yet forged, but ever will do that, answered the other, sadly, glancing upon a rounded hammock on the deck, whose gathered sides some noiseless sailors were busy in sewing together. Not forged, and snatching Perth's leveled iron from the crotch, Ahab held it out, exclaiming, "Look here in this hand I hold his death, tempered in blood, and tempered by lightning, are these barbs, and I swear to temper them triply in that hot place behind the fin, where the white whale most feels his accursed. When God keep thee, old man, seest thou that, into the hammock, I bury but one of 5 stout men who were alive only, but were dead ere night. Only that one I bury, the rest were buried before they died. You sail upon their tomb." Then turning to his crew, "Are you ready there? Place the plank, then on the rail, and lift the body. So then, oh, God advancing towards the herring with uplifted hand, may the resurrection and the light brace forward." "Up helm!" cried Ahab like lightning, but the suddenly started Pequod was not quick enough to escape the sound of the splash that the corpse soon made as it struck the sea. Not so quick indeed, but that some of the flying bubbles might have sprinkled her hull with their ghostly baptism, as Ahab now glided from the dejected Delight, the strange life-buoy hanging at the Pequod's stern to conspicuous relief. "Huh? Look yonder, men!" cried a foreboding voice in her wake. "In vain, O ye strangers, ye fly our sad burial, ye, but turn us your taffrail to show us your coffin." Chapter 132. The Symphony. It was a clear, steel-blue day. The firmaments of air and sea were hardly separable in that all-pervading azure. Only the pensive air was transparently pure and soft, with a woman's look, and the robust and man-like sea heaved with long, strong, lingering swells as Samson's chest and his sleep. Hither and thither on high glided the snow-white wing of small, unspeckled birds. These were the gentle thoughts of the feminine air. But to and fro in the deeps, far down in the bottomless blue, rushed mighty leviathans, swordfish, and sharks. And these were the strong, troubled, murderous thinkings of the masculine sea. But though thus contrasting within, the contrast was only in shades and shadows without. Those two seemed one. It was only the sex, as it were, that distinguished them. Aloft, like a royal czar and king, the sun seemed giving this gentle air to this bold and rolling sea, even as bride to groom, and at the girdling line of the horizon, the soft and tremulous motion, most seen here at the equator, denoted the fond, throbbing trust, the loving alarms, with which the poor bride gave her bosom away, tied up and twisted, gnawed and knotted with wrinkles, haggardly firm and unyielding, his eyes glowing like coals that still glow in the ashes of ruin. Untottering Ahab stood forth in the clearness of the morn, lifting his splintered helmet of a brow to the fair girl's forehead of heaven. Oh, immortal infancy and innocency of the azure. Invisible ringed creatures that frolic all round us. Sweet childhood of air and sky. How oblivious were ye of old Ahab's close court. But so have I seen little Miriam and Martha, laughing-eyed elves, heedlessly gambol around their old sire, sporting with the circle of singed locks which grew on the marge of that burnt-out crater of his brain. Slowly, crossing the deck from the scuttle, Ahab leaned over the side and watched how his shadow in the water sank, and sank to his gaze, the more that he strove to pierce the profundity. But the lovely aromas in that enchanted air did at last dispel, for a moment, cankerous thing, his soul. That glad, happy air, that winsome sky, did at last stroke and caress him. The stepmother world, so long cruel, forbidding, now threw affectionate arms round his stubborn neck, and did seem to joyously sob over him, as if over one that, however wilful and erring, she could yet find it in her heart to speak. From beneath his slouched hat, Ahab dropped a tear into the sea, nor did all the Pacific contain such wealth as that one wee drop. Starbuck saw the old man, saw him, how he heavily leaned over the side, and he seemed to hear in his own true heart the measureless sobbing that stole out of the center of the serenity, careful not to touch him or be noticed by him. He yet drew near to him and stood there. Ahab turned. Starbuck. Sir. Oh, Starbuck! It is a mild and a mild-looking sky. On such a day, very much such a sweetness, I struck my first whale, a boy harpooner of 18, 40 years ago. 40 years of continual whaling, 40 years of privation and peril and storm. 40 years on the pitiless sea. For 40 years has Ahab forsaken the peaceful land. For 40 years to make war on the horrors of the deep. Aye, and yes, Starbuck. Out of those I have not spent ashore. When I think of this life I have led, the desolation of solitude it has been, the masoned, walled town of the captain's exclusiveness, which admits but small entrance to any sympathy from the green country without. Oh, weariness, heaviness, Guinea Coast slavery of solitary command. When I think of all this, only half suspected, not so keenly known to me, and how for 40 years I have fed upon dry salted, fit emblem of the dry nerve of my soil. When the poorest landsman has had fresh fruit to his daily hand, and broken the world's fresh bread to my moldy crests, away, whole oceans away, from that young girl wife that wedded past 50, and sailed for Cape Horn the next day. leaving but one dent in my marriage pillow, rather a widow with her husband alive. I widowed that poor girl when I married her, Starbuck. And then the madness, the frenzy, the boiling blood, and the smoking brow with which for 1,000 lowerings old Ahab has furiously, foamingly chased his prey, more a demon than a man. Aye. What a 40 years fool has old Ahab been. Why this strife of the chase? Why weary and palsy the arm, at the oar, and the iron, and the lance? How the richer or better is Ahab now? Behold, Starbuck, is it not hard that with this weary load I bear, one poor leg should have been snatched from under me? Here, brush this old hair aside. It blinds me that I seem to weep. Locks so grey did never grow, but from out some ashes. But do I look very old, so very, very old? I feel deadly faint, bowed and humped, as though I were Adam, staggering the piled centuries since paradise. God, crack my heart, stave my brain. Mockery, bitter, budding mockery of gray hairs. Have I lived enough joy to wear you, and seem and feel thus intolerably old? Close! Stand close to me, Starbuck. Let me look into a human eye. It is better than to gaze into a sky, better than to gaze upon God, by the green land, by the bright hearth stone. This is the magic glass, and I see my wife and my child in Nai. No. Stay on board. Or not when I do, when branded Ahab gives chase to Moby Dick. That hazard shall not be mine. No, not with the faraway home I see in that eye. Oh, my captain, noble soul, brandled heart. After all, why should anyone give chase to that hated fish? Away with me. Let us fly these deadly waters. Let us home. Wife and child, too, are Starbuck's. Wife and child of his brother and sister, playfellow youth. Even as thine, sir, are the wife and child of thy loving, longing, paternal old age. I see why. Away. Let us away. This instant let me alter the course. How cheerily, how hilariously, oh my captain, would we bowl on our way to see old Nantucket again. I think, sir, they have some such mild blue days, even as this, in Nantucket. They have. I have seen them, some summer days, in the morning. About this time, yes, it is his new nap now. The boy viciously wakes, sits up in bed, and his mother tells him of me, of cannibal, old me. How I am abroad upon the deep, but will yet come back to dancing. 'Tis my Mary herself. She promised that my boy, every morning, should be carried to the hill, to catch the first glimpse of his father's sail. Yes, no more. It is done. We head for Nantucket. Come, my captain, study out the course, and let us away. See, the boy's face from the window, the boy's hand on the hill. But Ahab's glance was averted. Like a blighted fir tree he shook, and cast his last cindered apple to the soil. What is it, an earthly thing? What cozening lord and master and cruel, remorseless emperor, that against all natural lovings and longings I so keep pushing and crowding, and jamming myself on all the time, recklessly making me ready to do what in my own proper natural heart I durst not so much as dare. Is Ahab? Is it I, God, or who, that lifts this on? But if the great sun move not of himself, but is as an errand boy in heaven, nor one single star can revolve but by some invisible power, how then can this one small heart beat, this one small brain think thoughts? Unless God does that beating, does that thinking, does that living, and not I. By heaven, man, we are turned round and round in this world, like yonder windlass, and fate is the handspike. And all the time, lo, that smiling sky and this unsounded sea. Look, see on albacore, who put it into him to chase and fang that flying fish. Where do murderers go, man? Who's to doom when the judge himself is dragged to the bar? But it is a mild wind and a mild-looking sky. And the air smells now, as if it blew from a faraway meadow. They have been making hay somewhere under the slopes of the Starbuck, and the mowers are sleeping in mown hay. Sleeping. I toil, we howl, we all sleep at last on the field. Sleep, I, and rust amid greenness, as last year's sides flung down and left in the half-cut swaths Starbuck, but blanched to a corpse's hue with despair. The mate had stolen away. Ahab crossed the deck to gaze over on the other side, but started at 2 reflected, fixed eyes in the water there. So Fadal was motionlessly leaning over the same rail. Chapter 133. The Chase, First Day. That night, in the mid-watch, when the old man, as his wont at intervals, stepped forth from the scuttle and went to him, he suddenly thrust out his face fiercely, snuffing up the sea air as a sagacious ship's dog will, in drawing nigh to some barbarous isle. Then he declared that a whale must be near. Soon that peculiar odor, sometimes to a great distance given forth by the living sperm, was palpable to all. Nor was any mariner surprised when, after inspecting the compass and then the dog vane, and then ascertaining the precise bearing of the odor as nearly as possible, Ahab rapidly ordered the ship's course to be slightly altered, and the sail to be shortened. The acute policy dictating these movements was sufficiently vindicated at daybreak by the sight of a long sleek on the sea directly lengthwise ahead, smooth as oil and resembling a watery ring, a polished, metallic-like morsel of some swift tide rip, the mouth, rapid stream. Man, the mastheads, call all hands! Thundering with the butts of 3 clubbed handspikes on the forecastle deck, Dagur roused the sleepers with such judgment claps that they seemed to exhale from the scuttle. So instantaneously did they appear with their clothes in their hands. "What do you see?" cried Ahab, flattening his face to the sky. Nothing, sir," was the sound hailing down in reply. "To a gallant sails, stun sails, alow and aloft, and on both sides. All sail being set, he now cast loose the lifeline, reserved for swaying him royal masthead. And in a few moments they were hoisting him thither, when, well, but 2/3 of the way aloft, and while peering ahead through the horizontal vacancy between the main topsail and top-gallant sail, he raised it gull-like. There she blows. There she blows. A hump like a snow hill. It is Moby Dick, fired by the cry, which seemed simultaneously taken up by the 3 lookouts. The men on deck rushed to the rigging to behold the famous whale they had so long been pursuing. Ahab had now gained his final perch, some feet above the other lookouts, Toshtigo standing just beneath him on the cap of the top-gallant mast, so that the imp was almost on a level with Ahab's heel. From this height, the whale was now seen some mile or so ahead, at every roll of the sea, revealing his high sparkling hump, and regularly jetting his silent spout. To the credulous mariners, it seemed that the same silent spout they had so long ago beheld in the moonlit Atlantic and Indian Oceans. "And did none of you see it before?" cried Ahab, hailing the perched men all around him. "I saw him almost that same instant, sir, that Captain Ahab did, and I cried out," said Tashtego. "Not the same instant." "Not the same? No, the doubloon is mine. Fate reserved the doubloon for me. None of ye could have raised the light whale first. There she blows. There she blows. There she blows. There again. There again," he cried in long-drawn, lingering, emphatic tones. attuned to the gradual prolongings of the whale's visible jets. He's going to sound in stun sails, down topgallant sails. Stand by. 3 boats. Mr. Starbuck, remember, stay on board and keep the ship helm. There, love. Level point. So, steady, man, steady. There go flukes. No, no, only black water. Already the boat's there. Stand by, stand by. Lower me, Mr. Starbuck. Lower, lower, quicker. And he slid through the air to the deck. He is heading straight to leeward, sir, cried Stubb. Right away from us. Cannot have seen the ship yet. He done, man? Stand by the braces. Hard down the helm. Brace up. Shiver her. Shiver her. So, well, that boats. Soon, all the boats but Starbuck's were dropped. All the boat sails set, all the paddles plied, with rippling swiftness, shooting, and Ahab heading the onset. A pale, death glimmer lit up Fedala's sunken eyes. A hideous motion gnawed his mouth. Like noiseless, nautilus shells, their light prows sped through the sea, but only slowly they neared the foe. As they neared him, the ocean grew still more smooth, seemed drawing a carpet over its wings, seemed a new meadow, so serenely it spread. At length the breathless hunter came so nigh his seemingly unsuspecting prey that his entire dazzling hump was distinctly sliding along the sea as if an isolated, continually set, as if he saw the vast, involved wrinkles and slightly projected head. Before it, far out on the soft Turkish rugged waters, with the glistening white shadow from his broad, milky forehead, a musical rippling playfully accompanying the shade, and behind, the blue waters interchangeably flowed over to the moving valley with his steady weight. And on either hand, bright bubbles arose and danced by his side. But these were broken again by the light toes of hundreds of gay fowl, softly feathering the sea, alternate with their fitful flight, and like to some flag, staff rising from the painted hull of an artisan, the tall but shattered pole projected from the white whale's back, and at intervals one of the cloud of soft-toed fowls hovering, and to and fro skimming like a canopy over the fish, silently perched and rocked on his pole, a long tail feathers streaming like pennants, a gentle joyous, a mighty moment of repose and swiftness, invested the gliding light. Not the white bull Jupiter, swimming away with ravished Europa, clinging to his graceful horns, his lovely, leering eyes sideways, intent, with smooth, bewitching fleetness, rippling straight for the nuptial bower. Not Jove, not that great, Majesty Supreme, yes, did surpass the glorified white whale, as he so divinely swam. On each soft side, coincident with the parted swell, that but once leaving him, then flowed so wide away, on each bright side, the whale shed off enticings. No wonder there had been some among the hunters who namelessly, transported an hour by all this serenity, had ventured to assail, but had fatally found that quietude, that the vesture of tornado, yet calm, enticing calm. Oh, well, thou glidest on, to all who for the first time eye thee, no matter how many in that same way thou made dividual and destroyed before. And thus, through the serene tranquillities of the tropical sea, among waves whose hand-clappings were suspended by exceeding rapture, storing terrors of his stem struggle, but soon the forepart of him slowly rose from the water. For an instant, his whole marbleized body formed a high arch like Virginia's natural bridge, and warningly waving his bannered flukes in the air, the grand god revealed himself, sound out of sight. Hoveringly, halting, and dipping on the wing, the white sea fowls, longingly over the agitated that he lay. With oars apeak and paddles down, the sheets of their sails adrift, the 3 boats now stilly floated, awaiting Moby Dick's reappearance. An hour, said Ahab, standing rooted in his boat's stern, and he gazed beyond the whale's place, towards the dim blue spaces and wide, wooing vacancies to leeward. It was only an instant, for again his eyes seemed whirling round in his head as he swept the watery circle. The breeze now freshened. The sea began to swell. The birds, cried Tashtego, in long Indian file, as when herons take wing. The white birds were now all flying towards Ahab's boat, and when within a few yards began fluttering over the water there, wheeling round and round with joyous, expectant cries. Their vision was keener than man's. Ahab could discover no sign in the sea, but suddenly, as he peered down and down into its depths, he profoundly saw a white living spot, no bigger than a white weasel, with wonderful celerity uprising and magnifying as it rose till it turned. And then there were plainly revealed 2 long crooked rows of light glistening teeth floating up from the undiscoverable bottom. It was Moby Dick's open mouth and scrolled jaw, his vast shattered bulk still half blending with the blue of the sea. The glittering mouth yawned beneath the boat like an open-doored marble tomb, and giving one sidelong sweep with his steering oar, Ahab whirled the craft aside from this tremendous apparition. Then, calling upon Fedallah to change places with him, went forward to the bows, and seizing Perth's harpoon, commanded his crew to grasp their oars and stand by the stern. Now, by reason of this timely spinning round the boat upon its axis, its bow, by anticipation, was made to face the whale's head while yet under water. But as if perceiving the stratagem, Moby Dick, with that malicious intelligence ascribed to him, sidlingly transplanted himself, as it were, shooting his lengthwise with the boat. Through and through. Through every plank and each rib, it thrilled for an instant, the whale obliquely lying on his back in the manner of a biting shark, slowly and feeling its bows full within his mouth, so that the long, skull lower jaw curled high up into the open air, teeth caught in a rowlock. The bluish pearl light of the inside of the jaw was within 6 inches of Ahab's head and reached higher than that. In this attitude, the white whale now shook a slight cedar as a mildly cruel cat or mouse. With unastonished eyes, Fedallah gazed and crossed his arms. But the tiger-yellow crew were tumbling over each other's heads to gain the uttermost stern. And now, while both elastic gunwales were springing in and out as the whale dallied with craft in this devilish, from his body being submerged with the boat, he could not be darted at from the boat, for the bows were almost inside of him. And while the other boats involuntarily paused, as before a quick crisis impossible to withstand, then it was that monomaniac Ahab, furious with this tantalizing vicinity of his foe, which placed him all alive and helpless in the very jaws he hated. Frenzied with all this, he seized the long bone with his naked hand, and wildly strove to wrench it from its gripe. As now he thus manly strove, the jaw slipped from him. The frail gunwales bent in, collapsed, and snapped, as both jaws, like an enormous shears, sliding further aft, bit the craft completely in twain, and locked themselves fast again in the sea, midway between the 2 floating wrecks. These floated aside, the broken ends drooping, the crew at the stern rack to the gunwale, and striving to hold fast to the bow. At that preluding moment, ere the bow was yet snapped, Ahab, the first to perceive the whale's intent, by the crafty outraising of his head, a movement that loosed his hold for the time. At that moment, his hand had made one final effort to push the boat out of the bight, but only slipping further into the whale's mouth and tilting over sideways as it slipped. The boat had shaken off his hold, spilled him out of it as he leaned to the push, and so he fell flat-faced upon the sea. Ripplingly withdrawing from his prey, Moby Dick now lay at a little distance, vertically thrusting his oblong white head up and down in the billows, and at the same time slowly revolving his whole spindled body, so that when his vast wrinkled forehead rose some 20 out of the now rising swells, with all their confines dazzling against it, vindictively tossing their shivered spray still higher to the air. So, in a gale, the but half-baffled billows only recoil from the base of the Eddystone, triumphant to overleap its summit with their scud. This motion is peculiar to the sperm whale. It receives its designation, pitch pulling, from its being likened to that preliminary up and down poise of the whale ants in the exercise called pitch pulling, previously described. By this motion, the whale must best and most comprehensively view whatever objects may be encircling him. But soon, resuming his horizontal attitude, Moby Dick swam swiftly round and round the wrecked crew, sideways churning the water in his vengeful wake, as if lashing himself up to still another and more deadly assault. The sight of the splintered boat seemed to madden him, as the blood of grapes and mulberries cast before Antiochus's elephant in the Book of Maccabee. Meanwhile, Ahab, half smothered in the foam of the whale's insolent tail, and too much of a cripple to swim, though he could still keep afloat, even in the heart of such a whirlpool as that. Helpless Ahab's head was seen like a tossed bubble, which the least chance shock might burst from the boat's fragmentary stern. Fidallah, and curiously and mildly eyed him. The clinging crew at the other drifting end could not succor him. More than enough was it for them to look to themselves, for so revolvingly appalling was the white whale's aspect, and so planetarily swift the ever-contracting circles it seemed horizontally swooping upon. And though the other boats, unharmed, still hovered hard by, still they dared not pull into the eddy to strike, lest that should be the signal for the instant destruction of the jeopardized castaway, Ahab and all. Nor in that case could they themselves hope to escape. With straining eyes then, they remained on the outer edge of the direful zone, whose center had now become the old man's head. Meantime, from the beginning, all this had been described from the ship's mastheads, and, squaring her yards, she had borne down upon the scene, and was now so nigh that Ahab in the water hailed her. Sail on the moment that they speak, breaking, dashed on him from Moby Dick, and whelmed him. But struggling out of it again, in chancing to rise on the towering crest, he shouted, "Sail on the whale! Drive him off!" The Pequod's prows were pointed, and, breaking up the charmed circle, she effectually parted the white whale from his victim. As he sullenly swam off, the boats flew to the rescue. Dragged into Stubbs' boat with bloodshot, blinded eyes, the white brine cake, the long tension of Ahab's bodily strength did crack, and helplessly he yielded to his body's doom, for a time, lying all crushed in the bottom of Stubbs' boat, like one trodden underfoot of herds of elephants. Far inland, nameless wails came as desolate sounds from out ravines. But this intensity of his physical prostration did just, so much, the more abbreviated. In an instant's compass, great hearts sometimes condense to one deep pang, the sum total of those shallow pains kindly diffused through feebler men's whole lives. And so, such hearts, though summary in each one's suffering, still, if the gods decree it, in their lifetime aggregate a whole age of woe, wholly made up of envious intensity. For even in their pointless centers, those noble natures contain the entire circumferences of inferior souls. "The harpoon," said Ahab, halfway rising and driving leaning on one bended arm. "Is it safe?" "Aye, sir, for it was not darted." "This is it," said Stubb, showing it. "Lay it before me. Any missing men?" 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 5 oars, sir, and here. That's good. Help me. Man, I wish to stand. So, I see him. There. Going to leeward still. What a leaping spout. Hands off from me. Yeah. The eternal sap runs up in Ahab's bones again. Set the sail. Out oars. The helm. It is often the case that when a boat is stowed, its crew, being picked up by another boat, help to work that second boat. And the chase is thus continued. with what is called double-banked oars. It was thus now, but the added power of the boat did not equal the added power of the whale, for he seemed to have treble-banked his every fin, swimming with a velocity which plainly showed that if now, under these circumstances, pushed on, the chase would prove an indefinitely prolonged, if not a hopeless one. Nor could any crew endure for so long a period such an unintermitted, intense straining at the oar. A thing barely tolerable only in some one brief vicissitude. Itself, then, as it sometimes happens, offered the most promising chase. Accordingly, the boats now made for her, and were soon swayed up to their cranes, the two parts of the wrecked boat having been previously secured by her and then hoisting up to her side, stacking her canvas high up and sideways, outstretching it with stun sails, like the double-jointed wings of an albatross. The people had bore down in the leeward of Moby Dick. At the well-known, methodic the whale's spout was, and when he would be reported as just gone down, Ahab would take the time, and then pacing the deck, binnacle watch in hand, so soon as the last second of the allotted hour expired, his voice was heard. "Whose is the doubloon now? Do you see him?" And if the reply was, "No, sir," straightway he commanded them to lift him to his perch. In this way, the day wore on, Ahab now aloft in motion, anon, unrestingly pacing the planks. As he was thus walking, uttering no sound except to hail the men aloft, or to bid them hoist a sail still high, or to spread one to a still greater breadth, thus to and fro pacing. Beneath his slouched head, at every turn, he passed his own wrecked boat, which had been dropped upon the quarterdeck and lay there reversed, broken bow to shattered stern. At last he paused before it, and as an already overcrowded sky, fresh troop of clouds will sometimes sail across, so over the old man's face there now stole some such added gleam. Stubb saw him pause, and perhaps intending, not vainly though, to evince his own unabated fortitude, and thus keep up a valiant place in his captain's mind, and eyeing the wreck exclaimed, the thistle the ass refused. It pricked his mouth too keenly, "Sir, ha, ha, what soulless thing is this that laughs before a wreck? Man, yeah, did I not know thee brave, as feel as fire, and as mechanical, I could swear thou wert a poltroon. Groan nor laugh should be heard before a wreck." "Aye, sir," said Starbuck, drawing near to the solemn sight. "An omen, and an ill one." "Omen. Omen? The dictionary. If the gods sink to speak outright to me, they will honorably speak outright, not shake their heads and give an old wives' darkling hint. Begone! You two are the opposite poles of one thing. Starbuck is Stubb reversed, and Stubb is Starbuck. And he too are all mankind. And Ahab stands alone among the millions people there, nor gods, nor men. Cold, cold, I shiver. How now? Did ye see him? Sing out for every spout, though he spout 10 times a second. Sing out. The day was nearly done. Only the hen of his golden robe was wrestling. Soon it was almost dark, but the lookout men still remained unset. "Can't see the spout now, sir." "Too dark," cried a voice from the air. "How heading when last seen?" "As before, sir, straight to leeward." "Good. He will travel slower now, 'tis night. Down royals and top gallant stun sails, Mr. Starbuck. We must not run over him before morning. He's making a passage now, and may heave to a while. Helm there, keep her full before the wind, aloft. Come down." Mr. Stubb sent a fresh hand to the foremast head, and see it manned till morning. Then, advancing towards the doubloon in the mainmast, "Men, this gold is mine, but I shall let it abide here till the white whale is dead. And then, whosoever of ye first raises him, upon the day you shall be killed. This gold is that man. And if on that day I shall again raise him. Then 10 times its sum shall be divided among all of ye. Away now, the deck is thine, sir. And so saying, he placed himself halfway within the scuttle, and slouching his hat, stood there till dawn, except when at intervals rousing himself to see how the night wore on. Chapter 134. The Chase. Second day. At daybreak, the 3 mast heads were punctually manned afresh. "D'ye see 'em?" cried Ahab, after allowing a little space for the light to spread. "See nothing, sir. Turn up all hands and make sail. He travels faster than I thought. The top-gallant sails. Fine. They should have been kept on her all night, but no matter, 'tis but resting for the rush." Here be it said that this pertinacious pursuit of one particular whale, continued through day into night and through night into day, is a thing by no means unprecedented in the South Sea fishery. For such is the wonderful skill, prescience of experience, and invincible confidence acquired by some of the natural geniuses among the native, that from the simple observation of a whale when last described, they will, under certain given circumstances, pretty accurately forever both direction in which to continue to swim for out of sight, and in these cases, somewhat as a pilot, when about losing sight of a coast, whose general trending he well knows, and which he desires shortly to again, but at some further point. Like as this pilot stands by his compass, and takes the precise bearing of the cape at present visible, in order the more certainly to hit the remote, unseen headland, eventually to be visited, so does the fisherman. At his compass with the whale, for after being chased and diligently marked through several hours of daylight, then when night obscures the fish, the creature's future wake through the darkness is almost as established to the sagacious mind of the hunter as the pilot's post is to him. So that to this hunter's wondrous skill, the proverbial evanescence of a thing writ in water, awake, is to all desired is well nigh as reliable as the steadfast link. And as the mighty iron leviathan of the modern railway is so firmly known in its every page that, with watches in their hands, men time his rate as doctors that of a baby's pulse, and lightly say of it the up train or the down train, such or such a spot, at such or such an hour. Even so, almost, there are occasions when these Nantucketers time that other leviathan of the deep, according to the observed humor of his speed, and say to themselves, so many hours hence, this whale will have gone 200 miles, will have about reached this or that degree of latitude or longitude. But to render this acuteness at all successful in the end, the wind and the sea must be the whaleman's allies. For of what present avail to the becalmed or windbound mariner is the skill that assures him he is exactly 93 leagues and a quarter from his port. Inferable from these statements are many collateral subtile matters touching the chase of whales. The ship tore on, leaving such a furrow in the sea as when a cannonball missant becomes a plowshare and turns up the level field. By salt and hemp, cried Stubb, but the swift motion of the deck creeps up one's legs and tingles at the heart. This ship and I are 2 brave fellows. Ha! Ha! Someone take me and launch me, spine wide, on the sea, for by live oaks my spine's a keel. Ha ha! We go the gate, eats, no dust behind.
If you want to find the damage, please lest...
There she blows, she blows, she blows. Right ahead was now the masthead cry. Aye, aye, cried Stubb. I knew it. You can't escape. Blow on, and split your spout. Oh, whale. The mad fiend himself is after you. Blow your trump. Blister your lungs. Ahab will dam off your blood as a miller shuts his water gate upon the stream. And Stubb did but speak out for well nigh all that crew. The frenzies of the chase had by this time worked them bubblingly up, like old wine worked anew. Whatever pale fears and forebodings some of them might have felt before, these were not only now kept out of sight through the growing awe of Ahab, but they were broken up and on all sides routed, as tinted prairie hares that scattered o'er the bounding bison. The hand of fate had snatched all their souls, and by the stirring perils of the previous day, the wreck of the past night's suspense, the fixed, unfearing, blind, reckless way in which their wild craft went plunging towards its flying line, by all these things, their hearts were gold along. The wind that made great bellies of their sails, and rushed the vessel on by arms, invisible as irresistible. Now, this seemed the symbol of that unseen agency, and if you were to race them, which so enslaved them to the race, they were one man, not 30, for it's the one ship that held them all, though it was put together of all contrasted oak, and maple, and pinewood, iron and pitch and hemp. Yet all these ran into each other in the one concrete hall which shot on its way, both balanced and directed by the long central keel. Even so, all the individualities of the crew, this man's valor, that man's fear, guilt and guiltiness, all varieties were welded into and were all directed to that fatal goal, Ahab, keel. The rigging lived. The mastheads, like the tops of tall palms, were outspreadingly tufted with arms and legs. Clinging to a spar with one hand, some reached forth the other patiently. Others, shading their eyes from the vivid sunlight, sat far out on the rocking yards, all the spars in full bearing of mortals, ready and right for their fate. Ah, how they still strove through that infinite blueness to seek out the thing that might destroy them. Why sing not out for him if ye see him? Cried Ahab when, after the lapse of some minutes since the first cry, no more had been heard. Sway me up, then. You have been deceived. Not Moby Dick casts one odd jet that way, and then disappears. It was even so. In their headlong eagerness, the men had mistaken some other thing for the whale spout, as the event itself soon proved. For hardly had Ahab reached his perch, hardly was the rope belayed to its pin on deck, when he struck the key to an orchestra that made the air vibrate as with the combined discharges of rifles. The triumphant halloo of 30 buckskin lawns was heard as much near the ship in the place of the imaginary jet, less than a mile ahead. Moby Dick bodily burst into, for not by any calm and indolent spoutings, not by the peaceable gush of that mystic fountain in his head, did the white whale now reveal his vicinity, but by the far more wondrous phenomenon. Rising with his utmost velocity from the furthest depths, the sperm whale thus booms his entire bulk into the pure element of air, and piling up a mountain of dazzling, shows his place to the distance of 7 miles. In those moments, the torn, enraged waves he shakes off, seeing his mane. In some cases, this breaching is his act of defiance. There she breaches, was the cry. In his immeasurable bravados, the white whale tossed himself salmon-like, so suddenly seen in the blue plain of the sea, and relieved against the still bluer margin of the sky. The spray that he raised for the moment intolerably glittered and glared like a glacier, and stood there gradually fading away from its first sparkling to the dim mistiness of an advancing shower in a veil. "Aye, breach your last to the sun, Moby Dick," cried Ahab. "The hour and 9 harpoon are at hand. Down, down, all of you, but one man at the fore. The boats. Stand by." Unmindful of the tedious rope ladders of the shrouds, the men, like shooting stars, slid to the deck by the isolated backstays and halyards, while Ahab, less startlingly, but still rapidly, was dropped from his perch. "Lower away," he cried, so soon as he his boat, a spare one, rigged the afternoon. "Mr. Starbuck, the ship is thine. Keep away from the boats, but keep near them. Lower, all." As if to strike a quick terror into them, by this time being the first assailant himself, Moby Dick had turned and was now coming for the 3 crews. Ahab's boat was central, and cheering his men, he told them he would take the whale head and head, Gade's pull straight up to his forehead be not uncommon fate. For when within a certain limit, such a course excludes the coming onset from the whale's sidelong vision. But ere that close limit was gained, and while yet all three boats were plain, as the ship's three masts to his eye, the white whale churning himself into furious speed almost in an instant as it were, rushing among the boats with open jaws and the lashing tail offered appalling battle on every side, and heedless of the irons darted at him from every boat, seemed only intent on annihilating each separate plank on which those boats were made, but skillfully maneuvered, incessantly reeled like train charges in the field. The boats for a while eluded him, though at times but by a plank's breadth, while all the time Ahab's unearthly slogan tore every other cry but his to shreds. But at last in his untraceable evolutions, the white whale so crossed and recrossed, and in 1,000 ways entangled the slack of the lines now fast to him, that they foreshortened, and of themselves warped the devoted boats towards the plank. Though now for a moment the whale drew aside a little, as if to rally for a more tremendous charge. Seizing that opportunity, Ahab first paid out more line, and then was rapidly hauling, and jerking in upon it again, hoping that way to disencumber it of some snarl. When lo, the sight more savage than the embattled teeth of sharks, caught and twisted, corkscrewed in the mazes of the line, loose harpoons and lances, with all their bristling barbs and points, came flashing and dripping up to the chocks in the bows of Ahab's boat. Only one thing could be done. Seizing the boat knife, he critically reached within, through, and then without the rays of steel, dragged in the line beyond, past it, inboard to the bows, and then, twice centering the rope into the chocks, dropped the intersected faggot, and was all fast again. That instant, the white whale made a sudden rush among the other. By so doing, irresistibly dragged the more involved boats of Stuff and Flask towards his flukes, gashed them together like two rolling husks on a surfy beach, and then, diving down into the sea, disappeared in a boiling maelstrom. They're working off the water to make sure that this happens been eed by the strickle and while the two crews were yet circling in the waters, reaching out after the revolving line tubs, oars, and other floating furniture, while the slope little Flask bobbed up and down like a vial, and Stubb was lustily singing out for someone to ladle him up, and while the old man's line, now parting, admitted of his pulling any pull to rescue whom he could, in that wild simultaneousness of 1,000 concreted perils, Ahab's yet unstricken boat seemed drawn up towards heaven by invisible wires, as arrow-like shooting perpendicularly from the sea, and sent it, turning over and over into the air, till it fell again, gunwale downwards, and Ahab and his men struggled out from under it like seals from a seaside cave. The first uprising momentum, modifying its direction, he struck the surf and voluntarily launched him along it, to a little distance from the center of destruction, and with his back to it, he now lay for a moment, slowly feeling with his flukes from side to side. And whenever a stray oar, bit of plank, the least chip or crumb of the boats touched his skin, his tail swiftly drew back, and came sideways, smiting the sea. But soon, as if satisfied that his work for that time was done, he pushed his pleated forehead through the ocean, and trailing after him the intertangled lines, continued his leeward way to travel his methodic pace. As before, the attentive ship, having described the whole fight, again came bearing down to the rescue, and dropping a boat, picked up the floating mariners, tubs, oars, and whatever else could be caught at, in sick. Some sprained shoulders, wrists, and ankles, livid contusions, wrenched harpoons and lances, inextricable intricacies of rope, shattered oars, and planks. All these were there, but no fatal or even serious. Ill seemed to have befallen anyone, as with Fidala the day before, so Ahab was now found grimly clinging to his boat's broken half, which afforded a comparatively easy float, nor did it so exhaust him as the previous day's mishap. But when he was helped to the deck, all eyes were fastened upon him, as instead of standing by himself, he still half hung upon the shoulder of Starbuck, who had thus far been the foremost to assist him. His ivory leg had been snapped off, leaving but one short, sharp splint. Aye, Starbuck, 'tis sweet to lean sometime, even there. And would old Ahab have leaned oftener than he has? The ferrule has not stood, sir, said the carpenter, now coming up. I put good work into that leg, but no bones broken, sir, I hope, said Stubb, with true Mr. Starbuck away and muster the boat's crew. Let me first help thee towards the bulwark, sir. Oh, how this splinter bores me. A cursed fate, that the unconquerable captain in the soul should have such a craven mate. Sir, a body man, not thee. Give me something for a cane. There, that shivered lance will do. Muster the men. Surely I've not seen him yet. I haven't. It cannot be. Missing. Quick, call them all. The old man's hinted thought was true. Upon mustering the company, the Parsee was not there. Vomit ring. Run all of the above. Allow. Cabin. Find it. Not God. Not God. But quickly they returned to him with the tidings that the Parsee was nowhere to be found. Aye, sir, said Stuff, caught among the tangles of your line. I thought I saw him dragging up. My line? My line? Gone? Gone. What means that little word? What death knell rings in it? That old Ahab shapes, as if he were the belfry. The harpoon, too. Toss over the litter there. You see it? The forged iron men. The white whales, no, blistered fool. This hand did dart it. 'Tisn't a fish. Aloft there. Keep it nailed. Quick. All hands to the rigging of the boats. Collect the oars. Harpooneers. The irons. Hoist the royals higher. The pearl on all the sheep. Helm there. Steady, for your life. I'll 10 times girdle the unmeasured globe. Yea, and dive straight through it, but I'll slay 'em yet. Great God. But for one single instant show thyself, cried Starbuck. Never wilt thou. Capture him, old man. In Jesus' name, no more of this. That's worse than devil's madness. 2 days chased. Twice stove it to splinter. Thy very leg once more snatched from thy evil shadow gone. All good angels mobbing thee with warnings. What more wouldst thou have? Shall we keep chasing this murderous fish till he swamps the last wave? Shall we be dragged by him to the bottom of the sea? Shall we be towed by him to the infernal world? Oh, impiety and blasphemy to hunt him, Starbuck, of late. I felt strange ever since that hour. We both saw, thou knowst what, in one another's eyes. But in this matter of the whale, be the fun of thy face to me as the palm of this hand, a lipless, unfeatured Ahab. This forever Ahab, man. This whole act's immutably decreed. 'Twas rehearsed by thee 1,000,000,000 years before this ocean. Fool! I am the fate's lieutenant. I act under orders. Look thou, Undine, that thou obeyest mine. Stand round me, men. You'll see an old man cut down to the stump, leaning on a shivered lance, propped up on a lonely foot. I'll make sure that they warn't. But Ahab's soul's a centipede that moves upon 100 legs. I feel strained, half stranded, as ropes that tow dismasted frigates in a gale. And I may look so, but ere I break, you'll hear me crack. Until you hear that, know that Ahab's hawser tows his purpose. Believe ye now in the things called omens. Then laugh aloud and cry encore. For ere they drown, drowning things will twice rise to the surface, then rise again to sink forevermore. So with Moby Dick, 2 days he's floated, tomorrow will be the third. Amen. Arise once more, but only to spout his last. Did you feel brave, men? Brave? As fearless fire cried Stuff, and as mechanical muttered Ahab. Then, as the men went forward, he muttered on the things called omens. Yesterday, I talked the same to Starbuck there, concerning my broken boat. Oh, how valiantly I seek to drive out of others' hearts what's clinched so fast in mine. The Parsee, gone, that he would press for Parrish and Classia, and how we never go on something. There's a riddle now might baffle all the lawyers, backed by the ghosts of the whole line of judges. Like a hawk's beak, it pecks my brain. I'll solve it, though. When dusk descended, the whale was still in sight to leave. So once more, the sail was shortened, and everything passed clearly as only the sound of hammers and the hum of the grindstone was heard till nearly daylight, as the men toiled by lanterns in the complete and careful rigging of the spare boats and sharpening their fresh weapons for the morrow. Meantime, of the broken keel of Ahab's wrecked craft, the carpenter of him another leg, while still, as on the night before, slouched Ahab stood fixed within his scuttle, his heliotrope glance anticipatingly gone backward on its dive. Set due eastward for the earliest sun. Chapter 135, The Chase. Per day. The morning of the third day, and fresh, and once more, the solitary nightman at the foremasthead was relieved by crowds of the daylight lookouts, who dotted every mast and almost every spar. "Do you see him?" cried Ahab there. But the whale was not yet in sight. In his infallible wake though, but follow that wake. That's all. Helm now. Steady, as thou goest, and hast been going. What a lovely day again. We're the new-made world, and made for a summer house to the angels, and this morning the first of its throwing open to them. A fairer day could not dawn upon that world. Here's food for thought, had Ahab time to think. But Ahab never thinks. He only feels that's tingling enough for mortal man. To think's audacity. God only has that right, incredibly. Thinking is, or ought to be, a coolness and a calmness, and our poor hearts throb, and our poor brains beat too much for that. And yet I've sometimes thought my brain was very calm, frozen calm. This old skull cracks so, like a glass in which the contents turn to ice and shiver it. And still this hair is growing now. This moment growing, and heat must breed it. But no, it's like that sort of common grass that will grow anywhere between the earthy clefts of Greenland ice or in Vesuvius lava. How the wild winds blow it. They whip it about me as the torn shreds of split sails lash the tossed ship they cling to. A vile wind that has no doubt blown ere this through prison corridors and cells and wards of hospitals, and now comes blowing as innocent as fleece. Men out upon it. It's tainted. Were I the wind, I'd blow no more on such a wicked, miserable world. I'd crawl somewhere to a cave and sleep there. And yet, 'tis a noble and heroic thing, the wind. People who ever conquered it. In every fight, it has the last and bitterest blow. Run tilting at it, and you but run through it. A coward wind that strikes stark naked, but will not stand to receive a single blow. Even Ahab is a braver thing, a nobler thing than that. Would now the wind that had a body, but all the things that most exasperate and outrage mortal man. All these things are bodiless, but only bodiless as objects, not as agents. But there's something all glorious and gracious in the wind. These one trade winds at least, but in the clear blows straight on, in strong and steadfast, vigorous mildness, and veer not from their mark, however the baser currents of the sea may turn and tack, and mightiest Mississippis of the land swift and swerve about, uncertain where to go at last, and by the eternal poles. These same trades that so directly blow my good ship on, these trades, or something like them, something so unchangeable, and full as strong, blow my keeled soul along. To it, aloft there, think, what do you see? Nothing, sir, nothing. And noon hand, the doubloon goes a-begging. See the sun? See the sun. Aye, aye, it must be so. I've oversailed. How got the start? Aye, he's chasing me now. Not I, him. That's bad. I might have known it too. Fool! The lines, the harpoons is towing. Mile, I have run him by last night. About. Come down, all of ye, but the regular lookouts. Man the braces. Steering as she had done, the wind had been somewhat on the Pequod's quarter, so that now being pointed, the braced ship sailed hard upon the breeze, as she returned the cream in her own white wake. Against the wind, he now steers for the open jaw, murmured Starbuck to himself, as he coiled the new-hauled main-brace upon the rail. God keep us, but already my bones feel damp within me, and from the inside wet my flesh. I misdoubt me that I disobey my God in obeying him. Stand by to sway me up, cried Ahab, advancing to the hempen basket. We should meet him soon. Aye, sir. And straightway, Starbuck did Ahab's bid once more. Ahab swung on high. A whole hour now passed, gold beaten out to ages. Time itself now held long breaths with keen suspense, but at last, some 3 points off the weather bow, Ahab descried the spout again, and instantly from the 3 mastheads 3 shrieks went up, as if the tongues of fire had voiced it. Forehead to forehead I meet thee, this 3rd time, Moby Dick. On deck there, brace sharper up, crowd into the wind's eye. He's too far off to lower yet, Mr. Starbuck. The sails shake. Stand over that helmsman with the topball. So. He travels fast, and I must down. But let me have one more good round look aloft here at the sea. There's time for that. An old sight, and yet somehow so young. I am not changed a wake since I first saw it. A boy from the sandhills of Nantucket. The same to Noah as to me. There is a soft shower to leeward, such lovely leewardings. They must lead somewhere, to something else than common wear, more palmy than the palms. Leeward, the white whale goes that way. Look the windward then, the better, if the bitterer quarter. But goodbye, old masthead. What's this? Green? Aye, tiny mosses in these warped cracks. No such green weather stains on Ahab's head, but there's the difference now between man's old age and matters. But I, old mast, we both grow old together. Sound in our holes, though, are we not, my ship? I, minus a leg. That's all. By heaven, this dead wood has the better of my live flesh. I can't compare with it. And I've known some ships made of dead trees outlast the lives made of the most vital stuff of vital fathers. What's that he said? He should still go before me, my pilot. And yet to be seen again? But where? Well, I have eyes at the bottom of the sea, supposing I descend those endless stairs, and all night I've been sailing from him, wherever he did suit to. I, like many more that uphold direful truth, as to myself, O parson. But, Ahab, there thy shot, thou short. Goodbye, masthead. Keep a good eye upon the whale, the while I'm gone. We'll talk tomorrow when the white whale lies down there tied by head and tail. He gave the word, and still gazing round him, was steadily lowered through the cloven blue air to the deck. In due time the boats were lowered, but as standing in a shallop stern, Ahab just hovered upon the point of the descent. He waved to the mate, who held one of the tackle ropes on deck, and bade him pause. Starbuck. Sir, for the 3rd time, my soul's ship starts upon this voyage. Starbuck. Aye, sir, thou will have it so. Some ships sail from their ports, and ever afterwards are missing. Starbuck. Truth, sir, saddest truth. Some men die at ebb tide, some at low water, some at the full of the flood. And I feel now like a billow that's all one crested cone, Starbuck. I'm old. Shake hands with their hands met, their eyes fastened. Starbucks tears the blue. Oh, my captain, my captain. Noble heart, go not, go not. See, it's a brave man that weeps. How great the agony of the persuasion. Lower away, cried Ahab, tossing the mate's arm from him. Stand by the crew. In an instant, the boat was pulling round close under the stern. The sharks, cried a voice from the low cabin window there. Oh, master, my master, come back. But Ahab heard nothing, for his own voice was high lifted then. And the boat leaped on, yet the voice spake true. For scarce had he pushed from the ship when numbers of sharks seemingly rising from out the dark waters beneath the hull, maliciously snapped at the blades of the oars every time they dipped in the water, and in this way accompanied the boat with their bites. It is a thing not uncommonly happening to the whale boats in those swarming seas, the sharks at times apparently following them in the same prescient way that vultures hover over the banners of marching regiments in the east. But these were the first sharks that had been observed by the Pequod, since the white whale had been first described. And whether it was that Ahab's crew were all such tiger-yellow barbarians, and therefore their flesh more musky to the senses of the sharks, a matter sometimes well known to affect them. However it was, they seemed to follow that one boat without molesting the others. Hark of rough steel, murmured Starbuck, gazing over the side, and following with his eyes the receding boat. Canst thou yet bring boldly to that sight, lowering thy keel among ravening sharks, and followed by the open mouth to the chase? And this, the critical third day, for when 3 days flow together in one continuous, intense pursuit. Be sure the first is the morning, the second the noon, and the third the even, the end of that thing, be that end what it may. Oh, my God. What is this that shoots through me and leaves me so deadly calm yet expectant, fixed at the top of a shudder? Future things swim before me, as in empty outlines and skeletons. All the past is somehow grown dim. Mary, girl, thou fattest in pale glories behind you. Boy, I seem to see, but thy eyes grown wondrous blue. Strangest problems of life seem clearing. Clad sweet between is my journey's end coming. My legs feel faint, like his who has footed all day. Feel thy heart, beats it yet. Stir thyself, Starbuck. Stave it off. Move, move. Speak aloud. Mast head there. See in my boy's hand on the hill. Crazed, aloft there. Keep thy keenest eye upon the bolts. See, he packs. He tears the vane, pointing to the red flag flying at the main truck. Up, and soars away with it. Where's the old man now? Seest thou that sight? Oh, Ahab, shudder, shudder. The boats had not gone very far, when by a signal from the mastheads, and downward, Ahab knew that the whale had sounded. But intending to be near him at the next rising, he held on his way a little sideways from the vessel. The becharmed crew maintaining the profoundest silence, as the headbeat waves hammered and hammered against the opposing bow. Drive, drive in your nails, oh you waves. To their uttermost heads, drive them, and no coffin, no curse can be mine, pimple. The waters around them slowly swell in broad circles, then quickly upheave, as if sideways sliding from a submerged berg of ice, swiftly rising to the surface. A low rumbling sound, a subterraneous hum, and then all held their breaths, as they draggled with trailing ropes, and harpoons and lances. The vast form shot lengthwise, but obliquely from the sea, shrouded in the thin dripping veil of mist. It hovered for a moment over the air, and then fell swamping back into the deep. Crashed 30 feet upwards, the water splashed for an instant like a fountain, then brokenly sank in a shower of flakes, leaving the surface. Give way, cried Ahab to the oarsmen, and the boat started forward to the attack. But maddened by yesterday's fresh irons that corroded in it, Moby Dick, combinedly possessed by all the fell from the wide tears of melted silver starting his brow beneath him. As head on, he came churning his tail among the boats, and once more flailed them apart, spilling out the irons and from its boats, and dashing in one side of the upper part of their bows, but leaving Ahab almost without a star, while Dabu and Queequeg were stopping the strained freaks. And as the whale, swimming out from them, turned and showed one entire flank as he shot by them again. At that moment, A quick cry went up, lashed round and round to the fish's back. Continued in the turns upon turns which during the past night the whale had viewed involutions of the lines around him, the half-torn body of the Parsi was seen, his sable raiment frayed to shreds. His distended eyes turned full upon old Ahab. The harpoon dropped from his hand. Be fooled, drawing in a long, mean breath. I see thee again. I now go as before, and this then is the hearse that thou didst promise. And I hold thee to the last lyre of thy word. Where is the second hearse? Away, mates, to the ship. Those boats are useless now. Repair them if you can, in time, and return to me. If not, Ahab is enough to die. Down, men. The first thing that offers to jump from this boat I stand in, that thing I harpoon. Boys, I can make one, I can make it. And so obey me. Where's the whale? Gone down again. But he looked too nigh the boat. For as if bent upon escaping the corpse he bore, and as if the particular place of the last encounter had been but a stage, Moby Dick was again steadily swimming, and had almost passed the ship, which thus far had been sailing in the contrary direction to him, though for the present her headway had been stopped. He seemed swimming with his utmost velocity, and now only intent upon pursuing his own straight path in the sea. Oh,
Is it, even now, the third day, to desist?
see? Moby Dick seeks thee not. It is thou that madly seekest him. Setting sail to the rising wind, the lonely boat was swiftly impelled to leeward by both oars and canvas. And at last, when Ahab was sliding by the vessel, so near as plain to distinguish Starbuck's face as he leaned over the rail, he hailed him to turn the vessel about and follow him not too swiftly in a judicious and glancing upwards, he saw Tashdedo, Queequeg, and Dedu eagerly mounted to the three mastheads, while the oarsmen were rocking in the two-staved boats, which had but just been hoisted to the side, and were busily at work in repairing them. One after the other, through the portholes, as he sped, he also caught flying glimpses of Stubb and Flask, busying themselves on deck among bundles of new irons and lances. As he saw all this, as he heard the hammers in the broken boats, far other hammers seemed driving a nail into his heart. But he rallied, and now, marking that the Vaner flag was gone from the main masthead, he shouted to Tashtego, who had just gained back perch, to descend again for another flag, and a hammer and nails, and so nail it to the mast. Whether fagged by the 3 days' running chase, and the resistance to his swimming in the knotted hamper, or whether it was some latent deceitfulness and malice, whichever was true, the white whale's way now began to abate as it seemed from the boat so rapidly nearing it once more. Though indeed the whale's last start had not been so long a one as before, and still, as Ahab glided over the waves, the unpitying sharks accompanied, and so pertinaciously stuck to the boat, and so continually bit at the plying oars, that the blades became jagged and crunched and left small splinters in the sea at almost every dip. Heed them not, those teeth, but give new roll-offs to your oars. Pull on. 'Tis the better rest, the shark's jaw, than the yielding water. But at every bite, sir, the thin blades grow smaller and smaller. They will last long enough. Pull on. But who can tell, he muttered, whether these sharks swim to feast on the whale or on Ahab. But, pull on. I, all alive. Now we near him. The helm. Take the helm. Let me pass. And so saying, 2 of the oarsmen helped him forward to the bows of the still flying boat. At length, as the craft was cast to one side and ran ranging along with the white whale's flank, he seemed strangely oblivious of its advance, as the whale sometimes would, and Ahab was fairly within the smoky mountain mist, which, thrown off from the whale's spout, curled round his great Monadnock hump. He was even thus close to him, when, with body arched back, and both arms lengthwise, high to the voice, he darted his fierce iron and his far fiercer curse, as both steel and curse sank to the socket, as if sucked into a morass. Moby Dick, sideways, cried, spasmodically rolled his knife flank against the bow, and without staving a hole in it, so suddenly did the boat over, that had it not been for the elevated part of the gun clung, Ahab would once more have been tossed into. As it was, 3 of the oarsmen, who foreknew not the precise instant of the dart, and were therefore unprepared for its effects, these were flung out, but so fell, that in an instant 2 of them clutched the gunwale, and rising to its level on a coat, hurled themselves bodily. The 3rd man, helplessly, dropping astern, but still afloat and swimming, almost simultaneously with a mighty volition of ungraduated swiftness. The white whale darted into the weltering. But when Ahab cried out to the steersman to take new turns with the line and hold it so, and commanded the crew to turn round on their seats and tow the boat up to him, the moment the treacherous line felt that double-strain tug, it snapped. What breaks in me? Some sinew cracks. 'Tis whole again. Oars burst in upon him. Hearing the tremendous rush of the sea-crashing boat, the whale wheeled round to present his blank forehead at bay. But in that evolution, catching sight of the nearing black hull of the ship.
Never.
Bethinking it may be a larger and nobler foe. Of a sudden, he bore down upon its advancing prow, smiting his jaws amid fiery showers of foam. Ahab staggered. His hands smote his forehead. I grow blind. Hands! Stretch out before me, that I may yet grope my way. Is it night? The whale. The ship, cried the cringing oarsman. Oars. Slope downwards to thy debts, O sea, that erreth thee forever to. Ahab may slide this last time upon his mark. I see the ship. Although the ship. Will you not save my ship? But as the oarsmen violently forced their boat through the bowing, two planks burst an instant only. Its half-lading, splashing crew trying hard to stop the gap and bail out the pouring water. Meantime, for that one, beholding instant, Teshtoga's masthead hammer remained suspended, and the red flag, half wrapping him as with a plaid, then streamed itself straight out from him as his own forward-flowing heart. While Starbuck and Stubb, standing upon the bowsprit beneath, caught sight of the gown-coming monster just as soon as he. The whale! Up helm. Oh, ye sweet powers of air, now hug me close. Let not Starbuck die, if die he must, in a woman's fainting fit. Up helm, I say, ye fools, the jaw. Is this the end of all my bursting prayers, all my lifelong fidelities? Oh, Ahab, row the steady, helmsman, steady. Nay, up helm it in. He turns to meet us. Oh, his unappeasable brow drives on to whose duty tells him he cannot depart. My God, stand by me now. Stand not by me, but stand under me, whoever you are that will now help Stubb. For Stubb too sticks here. I grin at thee, thou grinning whale. Who ever helped Stubb, or kept Stubb awake, but Stubb's own and now poor Stubb goes to bed upon a mattress that is all too soft. Would it were stuffed with brushwood. I grin at thee, thou grinning whale. Lucky, sun, moon, and stars, I call ye assassins of as good a fellow as ever spouted up his ghost. For all that, I would yet wring grasses with ye, would ye but hand the cup. Oh, thou grinning whale, but there'll be plenty of gulping soon. Why fly ye not, O Ahab? For me, off shoes, or jacket to it? Let Stubb dine his drawers. A most mouldy and over-salted death, thou. Cherries. Cherries. Oh, flask, for one red cherry, ere we die. Cherries! I only wish that we were where they grow. Oh, Stubb, I hope my poor mother's drawn my part payer. If not, few coppers will now come to her, for the voyage is up. And the ship's bows, nearly all the seamen now hung inactive. Hammers, bits of plank, lances, and harpoons mechanically just as they had darted from their victim. All their enchanted eyes intent upon the way, from side to side, vibrating, sent a broad banner spreading semi-swift foam. Retribution, swift vengeance, eternal malice were in his whole aspect, in spite of all that mortal man could do. The solid white buttress of his forehead smote the ship's starboard bow, till men and frail. Some fell flat upon their faces, like dislodged trucks. The heads of the harpooners aloft shook on their bull-like necks. Through the breach they heard the waters pour, as mountain torrents down a flute. The ship! The hearse, and the second hearse, cried Ahab from the boat. Its wood could only be American, diving to the settling ship, the whale wreck. But turning underwater swiftly shot to the surface again, far off the other bow, but within a few yards of Ahab's boat, where, for a time, he lay quiescent. I turned my body from the sun, went ho, Tashtego, let me hear thy hammer. Oh, you three unsurrendered spires of mine, thou on crack keel, and only God-buoyed hull, thou firm deck, and haughty howl, and pole-pointed prow, death's ship, must ye then perish, and without me am I cut off from the last fond pride of meanest shipwrecked captives. Oh, lonely death on lonely life! Oh, now I feel my topmost greatness lies in my topmost grief. Oh, oh! From all your furthest bounds, pour ye now in, ye bold billows of my whole foregone life, and top this one piled comber of my death. Towards thee I roll, thou all-destroying, but unconquering. To the last I grapple with thee. From hell's heart I stab at thee. For hate's sake I spit my last breath at thee. Sink all coffins and all hearses to one common pool. And since neither can be mine, let me then tow to pieces, while still chasing thee, though tied to thee, thou damned whale. Thus I give up the spear. The harpoon was darkened. The stricken whale flew forward. With igniting velocity, the line ran foul. Ahab stooped to clear it. He did clear it, but the flying turn caught him round the neck, and voicelessly, as Turkish mutes bowstring their victim, he was shot out of the boat ere the he was gone. Next instant, the heavy ice splice, its final end, flew out of the stark empty tub, knocked down an oarsman, and smiting the sea, disappeared in its depths. For an instant the tranced boat's crew stood still, then turned. The ship! Great God, where is the ship? Soon they were through dim, bewildering mediums, saw her sidelong fading as in the geisha's Fata Morgana. Only the uppermost mass out of water, well fixed by infatuate or fidelity or fate to their once lofty lookouts. And now concentric circles seized the lone boat itself, and all its crew, and each floating oar, and every lance pulled, spinning, animate and inanimate, all round and round in one vortex, carried the smallest chip of the Pequod. But as the last whelming mixingly poured themselves over the sunken head of the Indian mast, leaving a few inches of the erect spar yet visible, together with long streaming yards of the flag which calmly undulated, with ironical coinciding, over the destroying billows they almost touched. At that instant, a red arm and a hammer hovered backwardly upward in the act of nailing the flag faster yet faster to the subsiding spar. A skyhawk that tauntingly had followed the main truck downwards from its natural home among the stars, pecking at the flag, and incommoding Tastego that this bird now chanced to intercept its broad fluttering wing between the hammer and the wind. And simultaneously, feeling that ethereal thrill, the submerged savage beneath, in his death gasp, kept his hammer frozen there, and so the bird of heaven, with archangelic shrieks, and his imperial beak thrust upwards, and his whole captive form folded in the flag of Ahab, went down with his ship, which, like Satan, would not seek to hell, till she had dragged a living part of heaven along with her, and helmeted herself with it. That now small fowls flew screaming over the yet yawning gulf. A sullen weight surf beat against its steep sides. Then all collapsed in the great shroud of the sea, rolled on as it rolled 5,000 years ago. Epilogue, and I only am escaped alone to tell the joke. The drama's done. Why then, here does any one step bluff, because one did survive the wreck. It so chanced that after the Parsee's disappearance, I was he whom the fates ordained to take the place of Ahab's guidesman. when that mouseman assumed the vacant post, the same who, when on the last day 3 men were tossed from out of the rocking boat, was dropped astern. So, floating on the margin of the ensuing scene, full sight of it, in a half-spent section of the sunk shipping, I was then, but slowly drawn to the closing vortex. When I reached it, it had subsided to a creamy pool, round and round then, and ever contracting towards the button-like black bubble at the axis of that slowly moving circle, like another Ixion revolve, till, gaining that vital sense, the black bubble upward burst, and now, liberated by reason's cunning spring, and owing to its great buoyancy, rising with great force, the coffin life buoy shot lengthwise from the sea, fell over, and floated by my side. Buoyed up by that coffin for almost 1 whole day and night, I floated on a soft and dirge-like main. The unharming sharks, they glided by as if with padlocks on their mouths. The savage seahawks sailed with sheathed beaks. On the 2nd day, a sail drew nearer and picked me up at last. It was the devious cruising Rachel, that in her retracing search after her missing children, only found another orphan,